Junction City Council and local local cannabis control commission meeting for Wednesday, February 22nd. Thank you all for being here.
Recording in progress.
Thank you, Raj. Do we have any agenda additions or changes for tonight? Do we want to add in the email from Jess updating us from the audit on the management and what is the other words? Jess, what is it called? The management
Discussion.
what she said. Do we want to? So yes, if we add in the MD and A, MD and A, MD, the MD and A
Yeah, and that
under
Amber's laughing.
in 6B.
6B. Okay. Anything else? If not, I entertain a motion to amend the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Raj. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, please say nay. Great. Thank you. And moving on to the public to be heard. So this is the portion of tonight's meeting where if there are any members of the public who wish to talk to the board about something that is not on the agenda, now is the time to do so. As far as things that are on the agenda, please wait until that comes up and we will make sure that you have time to ask questions and talk about whatever it is that's concerning you. So we'll start with those in the room here. Does anybody have anything that's not on the agenda you'd like to talk about? Okay, moving to...
Maybe. Sorry.
Hi.
Don't want to point.
I'm not sure if it's on the agenda tonight, but I'm here to advocate for the senior center. Our space.
Yep.
We have heard rumors, that we were being displaced, and so we are worried about that. And I've talked individually with council members and received reassurance that we're not being displaced. But it sure would be nice to have it in the minutes. On the record.
Yep. Happy to help ensure you all in any way, shape, or form that we possibly can. As I had mentioned at our last budget hearing that we had a few weeks ago, and I've shared in other places, our council here has been absolutely committed to continuing the senior center as it has been. We need to contractually, in a way, if you will, through the end of the calendar year 23. And then for the next 6 months after that, we have included within the budget to make sure that we have the funds to be able to continue the senior center. So, and that's as far as we can go into the future in terms of the power that we have. Everything beyond that is up to next year's board. So, yes, it's there. Yes.
Can I make one comment? I think that it's possible, we've been talking about eventually we are going to have to renovate this entire space. We don't know, we can't say, because we don't really have a firm plan yet. And we don't know if it's going to include the senior center. If that were the case, then yeah, you would probably either, depending how long, have to be moved out of there or just closed off for a while the renovations occurred. But as I said, there's no firm plan yet for any of that. That's going to be taking place later this year. I don't know if that's been some of the source of the rumors that somehow got translated into us saying we're going to shut down the senior center. I don't know, but that is an issue that they are going to have to this coming year begin to look at a plan. But those renovations are probably a year or more away. And as Andrew said, it's sort of way out beyond the scope of what we can control at this point.
And that space too may end up being shared at different parts of the day. We're not, and I don't think, and I just want to be as clear as we can, we're really not in a position to leave space vacant at all. So if, for instance, the activities end at 3:30 or 4, there might be another group in there at 4:30 if they need it, or on the weekends or at other times to use the space. And I think that's somewhat happening now. So that could very well continue or be ramped up a little bit. I don't think the intention would be to displace anything that has been set there or leave it in a condition that it wasn't found in or anything like that. But I just, to be transparent, we're really just not in a place to anymore to leave space vacant when we need it. And I hope that with the new adult services person we're adding for the second half of, or basically January on, that they actually are able to come up with more activities and more thoughtful programming to add to it. And, you know, I'm sure there will be input and conversations and all kinds of things around that.
I think I saw up here in the front row, then Carl, then Heidi. Please.
I just wanted to add my enthusiasm for the senior center, for you to know when it does come up, how much it means to so many of us who go there regularly and enjoy it and find so much goodness in going. And we just want you to know that's the way we feel strongly, and for you to support us so that the senior center, as it is, as best it is, continues.
Completely hear you.
Carl?
At the time when the determination made of when renovation would be taking place, we assumed that would be on a temporary basis that we have to locate it. Finished.
At that point in time, whenever that decision would be made, we'd have to address it at that time. I don't want to promise something that I then or we as a community can't fulfill. So I don't know, because I also don't know the full scope of the plans and to whether the senior center will be disturbed in any way. Those are all possibilities that we'll come to when that time comes. I also know that there is a strong desire from the board and the staff to also talk with you all who use the senior center to inform you all and engage you in that process so that you are all informed.
The senior center has been going on. It's been a very dynamic, robust organization for the last decades.
Yep.
It's been the senior center primarily. There have been other functions. It didn't shut down a day for us or a day for us. It was dedicated primarily for senior center. I know band was down for Milton and he played, and there's other functions going on. We understand that, but it doesn't disrupt the activity within the senior center on whatever day it is.
I know before the municipality helped to provide these services, you all ran the senior center as a nonprofit, and by no stretch of the, and by no, it's not a concern of ours. If the senior center wants to become a private nonprofit again, more than welcome to. If there are ways that we can help to support that happening, more than happy to do that. It came down to there was a point where nothing was happening, somebody needed to help out, and so we wanted to help out.
I think that's an option that few people are entertaining right now. We could act somewhat independently and answer directly to the board or the city manager, whichever the situation might require. It's going to take us a while to get back up to speed again. But it's slow in China, and what's been going on, the manipulation of the COVID, it's kind of wrecked the organizations. Seniors just don't have the standard they had 30 years ago when they were young enough to stand up and articulate their feelings more strongly. They just don't want to get into the act. But this community has always done very well by the youth of this community. Seniors, we paid our dues over the years, and some of us
Yep.
seems like we're entitled. Keep this organization alive. If we gotta start over again and rebuild it, try to get people back, it gives them an opportunity to go somewhere and interact with other people. It's a more healthy climate.
Yep.
So that's important to a lot of seniors. At one time, our membership was approaching 300. I think it's great. It's going to be a while before we get back up to even 100. I think. But
Right.
if we don't have roadblocks, we can do it.
Right. Heidi?
I'd just like to clarify that we never did become.
One moment though. Just Heidi was next, and then we'll come over to you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are you sure? Okay. All right.
Okay, I just want to clarify, we
Yeah.
did not ever become a 501(c). We started that process, but we didn't finish it.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Annie? Or are you all set, Heidi, or did you? Okay.
She started talking, so I wanted to let her go.
Okay.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I remember a meeting that John Alden was at here in this room when there was a lot of talk about the renovations and how long they were going to be, how much it was going to cost, how many phases, and there was no guarantee in there that there would be a home for the senior center or the teen center. That's what I remember hearing. I'm gonna have to find that meeting again and listen to it and see if I'm wrong and bring it up at next public to be heard. But I thought what I heard means that there is actually some truth to these rumors that the senior center may have to find a new home because of the space needed for city government.
I'm a kind of person where I don't generally give guarantees. Hence why even to the question about, or what was asked earlier about into the future. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I can guarantee that there won't be a day where the senior center will need to close for a period of time and will not have a home. Don't do that because I don't know what's going to happen in the world. So I'm not going to provide a guarantee. So what I can say to you though, Heidi, is that we have said that we don't want the senior center to close. Philosophically, we don't want the senior center to close. We want to ensure that seniors have a place to go. To the best degree that we have a budget that allows for us to do so, and the capacity to do so in terms of a physical space to then go to if that center needs to close for any period of time. To the best degree that we can.
Can I just, I think I remember one meeting with John Alden that was not too long ago, and I remember very specifically what I asked John. And it was, so if this would help, and I think it was probably the only time we had John here to talk to him about it. And I said, if you looked at the part of the building that has the senior center and is also part of the teen center upstairs, I asked John because the teen center takes up most of the teen center takes up all the entire upstairs of this entire complex. And I asked John if he was able as an architect to completely redesign that space over there. Could he keep the senior center downstairs where it is, but fit most of the teen center upstairs? And he thought his answer was affirmative, but nothing committal. But that might have been, I think that was a discussion that we had, but we weren't right at that point talking about moving anyone out. Although, as Andrew said, we can't guarantee 2 or 3 years into the future that might happen. But that was the conversation that I remember took place here.
I just want to add that I think it's important to realize that thinking that far down the line, it is a reality that we need a bigger meeting space in this building. This isn't enough. And that was probably part of one of the conversations we've had with the architect, which were incredibly preliminary. We don't have a budget. We don't have a layout. We've seen some ideas. We're starting out as a new city. We've got a lot to juggle without a town partner anymore with all that space. I think we're all committing to having a senior center. I'm not going to say, though, that in 3 years it might also be doing some time at different locations for different activities. I said earlier, I'm hoping that there can be some more creative programming where people can get out because, being a senior is a very large span of age, and there are people that want to do different things. I've been approached about pickleball. I've been approached about all kinds of other activities and getting some more creative programming for seniors. Also a place to play bridge and a place to visit and a place to be with other people because that's incredibly important at all ages. I'm not going to commit, though, that for 25 years, again, that it's going to be in that very space. So I don't mean that we're trying to kick it out or we're trying to do anything to have it leave, but we will always have a space, I think, in my mind, for a senior center. And we're always going to commit to supporting that. I will say that for me. I don't see how we could otherwise approach this. But I hope that's enough, that we're going to make sure that, not just that it's enough, but I hope that reassures people that we are committed to this. We find it important. Speaking for myself, I find it incredibly important. Social isolation, I think Andrew's brought this up before, is a real big deal. So I want to be very transparent that, there's a lot we have to figure out. And we don't have the space we used to have to do a lot of these things. There's a lot of exciting things coming up, though, in terms of spaces being vacated in 3 to 5 years and other spaces that might come up. So I think it does sound scary, but I also think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to improve what we already have. And I think that's always going to be the focus for me, is to figure out, okay, well, it might not be right here, but if it's not right here, it's going to be better. And it's going to offer more.
Bear in mind that seniors really need to be on the ground floor.
Right.
Mhm.
Yep.
Upstairs, the elevators are.
Right.
Yep.
No, absolutely understood.
Isn't there a fair amount of space upstairs that over our heads?
There is.
That could be remodeled?
Yep, it's currently being used by Essex Chips and 3 of our finance staff.
And probably by more, as we redo the
Yep.
building, it's probably going to be reduced for them a bit.
I did think when I heard John speak that night that it was further along in the process
Okay.
and not preliminary. So,
Annie, your hand's up?
Thanks.
Yep.
Carl is so correct that we do so much for our youngest people in our community. Not to be crass, but there's money, right? There's money to be had in those programs. There's income to be had. And there's not as much, sadly, income to be had in seniors. It's a fact, it's true everywhere. I think that if we prepare better by making a line item about the seniors, by dedicating money and tasks intentional for seniors, that it would be reassuring, because Carl is correct. If you're 65 and older, not gonna have the energy and the commitment to come in and fight for your cause. And I also heard that the SFTA bus concept, I'm a little bit out of my depth here, doesn't work for everyone, because there are medical reasons and things that prevent people from being able to use that. And my mother was visiting here a few years ago. She's 80 and she physically has a hard time moving, and the senior bus was delightful, so much so that she still talks about it. And I think that while I respect 100% hear you and know that you really do mean what you're saying now, conceptual conversation is not something that has enough traction to push forward past you all being seated here at this table. And things happen, things change. And I think if you can do the best you can to designate money, you're saying we don't know if the budget, I don't think we can say about seniors, we don't know if the budget can support. I think about seniors, we must say the budget will support. What that means, depends on the budget year. But I think that a more dedicated line item, or a more dedicated conversation, and a more dedicated factual traction is more reassuring to people who dedicated a lot of time and energy to our community. The fact that our seniors once drove hard towards a 501c3, that's a lot. That's a lot to ask anyone to do. I don't think we should go in that direction. I think that our budget should support our seniors.
I think I saw another hand up front.
Yeah, I guess it's senior night. The only thing I'd add is, it's great that they proposed a new staff member for the Essex Junction Parks and Recreation. Just currently, I think it's 2 from the town, and part of their responsibilities are to kind of maintain the senior center.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know just from sometimes escorting somebody down to the senior center, sometimes it's been closed.
Yeah.
Just, either, they had something else came up, they had some priorities, not sure what the situation was, but, it had to close. And so if there's one, and this person is adult services, which I think we talked about that, I
Yep.
assume we did last
Yep.
time. Is just, it'd be nice if that thing was open every day, so if there's staffing for it versus one person, maybe there's a plan to have other people involved or volunteers or whatever, but I think that plan needs to be in place to, if there is a center, and thank you for the affirmation there, but just to make sure it's available to the seniors.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It'd be nice if they be able to have that combination, so it's Monday through Friday for whatever group, for part of the group, it's in the, that's, for whatever the activities are for most days.
Yep.
And we can't get in.
Right.
We should be able to get in. So I'm asking that if, once we get better reconstituted, get a board together, we can rebuild what we're doing. It's that important.
Absolutely.
Monday, I got away Monday, I didn't even go home because it's locked up because it's a holiday. May not be that important. Seniors go on that Monday when it's a holiday.
Good, Harlan?
As it stands now, I'm gonna put up what I believe in my head is how the senior center jointly between you and the town are working right now. And I believe that the town actually manages the senior center programming oversight, and also own the buses and run the buses, and that the village is providing space and whatever support they can. Does anybody know what the town's plans are?
I don't, and I don't know.
So that's why we're in limbo, and there's a lot of unknowns at the moment. Is we're unsure of what the town is going to continue and what they're going to offer moving forward.
They've had their budget meetings. I have not attended them. Our agreement with them provides the level of services that we currently have through this calendar year. After that, that's up for them to decide as the town select board what to do for their residents. And I don't know what that is.
Yeah, my understanding is that the plan is to provide more, is to continue to provide programming in different places. That's my understanding of it. But
Yep,
Yes.
absolutely.
Physically. That's our responsibility.
Yep.
See this from around here. Many of them.
Yes. So,
They contribute.
so back row, then middle row.
So,
Go ahead, you be the.
oh, I didn't see you. So it's been very challenging, the partnership between the town and the seniors. And I have to commend the city for, I think they've done everything that they promised they would do for the seniors by providing the beautiful space that they've had. The pandemic has been terrible, and Carl's absolutely right. We're in a rebuilding process. And I think the way what George is saying is that all this positive information, I know there's 3 plans for the space now. The seniors are totally out of the loop of what's happening. And so when staff members go into the community and say, the seniors are out, they've got to have space, this is true, then we're like, well, we don't know what to say because we have had no information from the town who's running the senior center. They say we're out of the loop too. We don't know. So I just feel like it's really it's great to hear you say that the communication partnership has got to build, because I think that's going to be a great sense of strength for the seniors, and they're going to feel encouraged and just to rebuild our relationship. I think they've had a good relationship with the city, and I just feel like the communication is going to be very important, because with the town staff there, we have no communication. It's a very difficult situation, challenging.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Are you saying when you say the staff people are saying the senior center is going to be out of there, you mean is the person, the staff member from the town? Is that who is saying that?
No,
Okay.
because, you know, I think the city folks, the staff are looking for places, they're trying to figure out what will be happening in the community. The teen center, they're starting to come out into the community and look at spaces.
Right. Yeah.
And so, we're asking, well, what's the future of what do you need space for?
Right.
And so that conversation is going on. It's not rumors. It's the reality of the situation that the communication isn't. I'm not sure all your staff is on the same page either about what's
Okay.
happening.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, I think that is probably from the First Congregational Church reached out to us, and they have a vacant space in their building. And so we did go over there to see, is it a useful space for other folks in the community? And as we've been talking about here, at some point, a renovation is going to have to happen to this building. And there is, we're going to need to figure out what space we need for offices and what space we can accommodate for other folks. And so we're just trying to explore what the possibilities are out there.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So just looking to clarify, because one of the concerns was like showing an investment in like the senior center. We're hiring somebody at $56,000 for half a year, correct, to run the programs?
Yes.
Or something the city is not happy for. We're dedicating a space to that location, something the city's continually done. So I would say we are putting an effort forward, if I'm not mistaken. My concern though, as a city resident who has many, many, many more years of paying taxes here, is I want to support seniors from the city of which I live. But we continually, Essex Junction as a whole has continually supported all the local towns with our recreation and our other events in which we hold like free and open events. And that comes from the taxpayers' dollars. And it doesn't always get offset by fees and other things. And that's my concern is when I hear we should open it up to all the other communities, but that's our tax dollars that do that. And that's not. So I would ask if we do continue to invest in this, which we have been doing, we ask the other communities when we get a head count of where they are, if they can participate in helping run this organization, which would actually make it better. Because then it's not just 10,000 people trying to run it. Maybe we're talking 30,000 people between the other communities trying to help run this senior center.
Yep. Absolutely. Go ahead, Annie.
Thanks. Can you define the new role, the $56,000 a year role?
It's an adult services director. That's as much as is defined as of today.
So,
There's no job description. Correct me if I'm wrong, Regina. There's no job description right now. This is something that is being proposed to us in this budget. If this budget, as is currently in front of us, ends up being passed, then staff would go forward with the portion of putting together a job description and all that type of stuff.
you're asking us to vote on a budget for $56,000 a year that doesn't have a job description?
Absolutely.
Getting into the budget conversation. Part of the evening.
So we not include seniors.
$56,000. Full-time coordinator. 5 days a week.
Not just for.
So this is getting us into the conversation about our budget, which is we're going to be having once this part can end. So if these questions are going to continue about the budget, I would ask to hold on until we can then get into the budget conversation so we can then talk about that more broadly. Okay. Does anybody have any non-budget related questions or other things that are on the agenda? And this includes out in Zoom land.
Well, I did have a question about the staff member and is it called adult services?
Yep.
Okay.
So we'll talk about that in the budget
So
time.
anybody 21 years of age or older, right? I mean, that they would be making programs for?
We could talk about that at the budget time when we get into that for the budget conversation.
Not defined for seniors.
So anybody else in the room have something that is not related to the budget or other things on the agenda? Okay. So Zoom land, I see Jason, your hands up.
Oops. Good evening. Thank you for fielding my questions. First thing I wanted to ask was I wanted to verify how the city collected its data regarding the value of the senior bus and how many of the residents were riding it. Because I was able to obtain a public record request, and it shows that for the fiscal year 2022, up-to-date data wasn't used when calculating the value of the senior bus, because it seems like more than 10 to 15 individuals would be using that to make that many trips.
What we can do, I don't have it in front of me to be direct. I can email you that packet of information because I just don't have it in front of me. But it's within one of our meeting packets.
Okay.
So last one, wasn't it?
No, that was from a while ago. You said you had other questions, Jason?
Yeah, my next question is regarding the replacement of the senior bus with the SSTA. I mean, as a person with a permanent physical disability myself, I can empathize with people that are at the mercy of their caretakers and stuff. The problem, as mentioned by another resident, is that the SSTA requires for you to be disabled. You have to have a doctor's note, so it's far more restrictive than the senior bus program. So my question is, how will the city address the needs of the seniors who need the program and qualified for the senior bus but don't qualify for SSTA?
Yep, if somebody does not qualify for SSTA, then there would not be something that is provided based on the budget that is being put together as of now.
Okay. My next question is there a line specific in the budget for senior programming?
So this is a budget question. If you want to hold on until later in the agenda, we can talk about it then.
Okay, yeah, those are the only questions I have regarding the senior program. Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else in Zoom land?
Just would like to say, because the senior bus is being discussed, it means everything to me. I love the senior bus and they are so on the wall. They arrive when they're supposed to and they're very accommodating to you, and I just want you to know I'm an enthusiastic supporter of the senior bus.
Thank you. All right, so we will now move into the public hearing, agenda item 5A, which is our second public hearing on the budget. And hello, Jess.
Hey, Jess. You don't have to be that far away if you don't want to.
Why don't you? Okay. You be comfortable.
Yeah, you do whatever you want.
Be where you want to be.
I mean, you're finally here, so it's sort of like,
No, okay, so I'm gonna get us started on, this is the same presentation that we did at the last meeting. Is that working right now? There we go. Okay. Okay, so the budget that we have prepared so far, again, we have talked about this a few times through the process, but there is no exact comparison for a new city budget. The best comparison is the FY22 mock city budget that was done. We applied an 8% inflation rate to that budget. That gets us to $10,691,000, and the budget that we are proposing for the city is 11.4. That is a 7% change. To be clear, the village budget in itself, when you don't consider anything that we are our taxes are going to at the town level, is 6.3 million right now. But comparing what the new city budget is to simply the village budget is not a good comparison, because a number of services are done at the town level and we need those to happen at the city level. So the budget itself does have some new positions and some new programs in it. And those are really sort of the contributing factors that are getting from a different place between that mock budget and the FY24 budget. So new positions, an administrative assistant, community development code enforcement person, and town planner. Essex EJRP, this adult position that we're talking about, and I'll get to that in a little bit more detail further down. And some other adjustments to manage building coordination. Stormwater, that used to be done in the town budget. We've got to figure out how to do that on the city side to meet our permit requirements. Essex rescue costs are going up, and so that's the increased cost to that. Essex Junction Cemetery Association, some shifting of the Memorial Day Parade and 4th of July to some of the general fund, and the capital transfer that we put into place to really support the solid capital program that we do here. So this is a true comparison. So what city residents are paying today is the 0.9298 combined tax rate between the city and the town. What we are proposing in this city-only budget for FY24 is a 0.9432 proposed tax rate, and that's a 1.4% increase. And so for a $280,000 home, that's $3,751 more than what they're paying today. We also have talked about some one-time expenses that are needed. These are not in the general fund. These are, we've put them into the local option tax fund so that we can, fully become a city, and really, now that we are a city, really do some strategic planning to figure out what are our big priorities for, next 5 years. What are the kinds of things that we want to really focus on now that we are a city. And so we've talked quite a bit too about different committees that we could have, and this sort of effort could really help us figure out what are those right committees going forward. So just going to run through the different programs, particularly in the budget. So administration, you see that new full-time administrative assistant there. Legislative, that's just a new expense category for the council that we haven't had before. The finance staff, so that's these positions are in place now already, but they're showing up in the FY24 budget as well. And information technology. So currently, even today, we are supported by the town IT department, and we need to migrate this spring to our own IT department. Our own IT services, and then we are preparing for a vendor to help us with that going forward. Assessing. So this is one of two departments that are staying joint with the town. The assessing department is staying joint until the reappraisal is complete. That's expected to be done in FY25, and then the agreement between the town and the city will be to relook at that going forward. Community development, already talked about on that first slide. The budget includes a proposed full-time code enforcement officer and a full-time planner. Some of that is to take up the concept of new committees that we would have now that we'll be on our own, and some of those joint committees between the town and the city may not continue on. Health and Human Services, that's a big one cost-wise. It's got the city's share of the police department in there. So the police department is the other big department that will remain shared. The agreement between the town and the city right now is for a 10-year agreement for keeping that as a joint department. This also has the Essex Rescue amount in there. We also have health officer duties. That's a standalone position right now, incorporated into one of those community development staff positions, so that this gets reduced over here on this side. And you can see the memberships for Green Mountain Transit and the Winooski Valley Park District. Again, those were dues that were paid through the town before. but we're seeing it now in the city side. And then public works and streets, you can just see that costs are really going up in terms of supplies and services there. Stormwater, again, we did have this on the village side. It included a portion of one full-time employee, and now we've really making that program more robust on the city side. Changes in the library budget include going to 10 hours per week for part-time staff so they can have 4 folks on each shift, and increasing collections for much more digital in-demand materials. So EJRP administration budget. They have same number of full-time full FTEs as in the prior year. There's some shifting of the costs of the Memorial Day and 4th of July celebrations. And we made some shifts to coordinate, to deal with the need for a buildings coordinator. That is not a new position. We're just reshifting some duties there. And then we have added a new adult programming budget. And so the concept here is a full-time adult program director position. As originally intended, this wasn't just for senior population. It was for folks we serve. We have a lot of programs for kids. We don't have a lot of programs for everybody who's not a kid up through seniors. So that was the concept of that. And also just acknowledging that agreement with the town is going to end at the end of December 2023. And it would just help give us some flexibility to figure out between now and then what, or when the budget is passed, and then what really is the right and best thing. And certainly have lots of intentions to speak with the senior community and figure out what that looks like. And then also we have talked about this before, in looking at the data, it made sense that the cost of the senior van was pretty significant in comparison to the number of people that are using that. And so it seemed to make sense to move to just increasing that SSTA usage amount, because we are charged for use. So that's what is in the budget for that. So debt, we've got the debt for the police facility. I think we had a question about that last time. That goes through FY34. The buildings, just general increases for particularly at 2 Lincoln, for actually having people here for the first time in a number of years. And that is, we are anticipating that that's going to go up as we have a more robust staff here in this office. And cleaning services are now under one city contract in a number of these different buildings. And really have been identifying repair and maintenance needs throughout all of these buildings. Capital funds.
So the first 3 funds that you see on this sheet are funded by general fund tax dollars, and the other 3 funds are funded, 4 funds, no, 3 funds, are funded by enterprise rates charged to users on those systems. So the capital reserve and the rolling stock funds are plans that have been in place. They are multi-year plans that have existed for a long time. And the capital reserve fund is also reviewed by the capital committee. The capital committee did not meet this year, but we made no changes to the capital plan that was approved by them in the prior budget year. So the plan is to get that work up and going this spring and start gearing up for the FY25 budget process. So those projects that are in the capital reserve and rolling stock and EJRP capital funds are all things that have been in the plans for several years now. Water, wastewater, and sanitation. We did take a really deep dive on some of these and are continuing to work on them, but we found that there are definitely projects that need to happen, especially with some of our pump stations and things like that. So Chelsea and Rick and I have been working on putting more detailed plans together as exist for the capital fund or capital reserve and rolling stock. So the enterprise funds, these 4 programs are all funded by user fees. So we have the EJRP program fund, water, wastewater, and sanitation. So EJRP has a proposed budget increase of about 12%. Water, wastewater, and sanitation anywhere from 11 to 18%, and we'll go into more detail in the next slides on those increases. So the primary driver in rate increases for the wastewater, water, and sanitation funds are the administrative fees that are charged to these funds. So the administrative fee is basically the cost of the admin staff and overhead for where that staff is housed, that gets charged from the general fund out to these enterprise funds. So the enterprise funds basically cover some of the cost of the general fund staff, Regina, myself, the rest of the finance team, costs related to the overhead here at Lincoln, and insurances. So the increase here is that in the FY23 budget process, there was a significant increase expected with the calculation, the formula that's been used historically. And it was decided by management last year to effectively reduce that increase down to just 12% to be more in line with the across the board increase budget wise in the general fund. Effectively what that's done is we didn't realize that full increase last year, so we're now seeing a snowball effect needing to realize it this year. So we acknowledge that there is a significant increase to rates projected for this upcoming fiscal year. But after that, we will have caught ourselves up and should be able to maintain a more even trajectory going forward. There are also some increases in the costs to operate our wastewater treatment facility. So costs of chemicals and the supplies and materials, parts, pieces for everything that we do at that plant have increased significantly. As in addition, there are unfunded mandates coming down from the state that we have to figure out how to implement and fund. And the only other addition here is the water fund debt. So the Main Street water line project that was approved at last annual meeting, we will be making our first payment on that debt in FY24. So the rates, just to really quickly summarize, the total utility bill that a resident receives based on an average of 120 gallons per day, which is an industry average that's used. We're projecting that the bill would increase just under 8.5% or $49.62 per year.
All right, so that's it for the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Regina and Jess. So with this being a public hearing, we will turn this over to the public in just a quick moment. So since we started off in the room last time, this time for public to be heard, we'll go into Zoom land first. So for those of you on Zoom, if you have any questions regarding what you've just heard about the budget, please go ahead and raise your hand. I will also say for the public hearing, please also be prepared to only speak once. Make sure you do address all of your questions to me. If after you ask your questions, we'll answer the questions. When your questions are done, we'll move on to the next person. If you have other questions after that, again, please only expect to go once and do not expect to be called back upon again. So Jason, I see your hand is up. I assume this is the question about, is there a separate budget for the seniors?
That is my first question, correct?
Jess or Regina, if whoever's controlling the screen, could you go to page 46 within our packet and share that on the screen?
Yep, give me a sec. Should have zoomed in before I got in.
Oh, it's all good. Thank you, Regina. So what you have on the screen now, this is the adult program, the adult services program budget. In here is the salary for that program director, potential benefits, and as other costs associated with that. The thing that is not in this portion of the budget is there is a special fund that is holding approximately $20,000 from when the senior service or when the senior program came under the municipality. That money is being held in that separate fund, and that would be used to help support programming.
Okay.
Is in here too. I don't know what page it is, but it's in here somewhere.
Well, I guess my concern would be that adult programming may exclude the very things that seniors need, and it may behoove the residents for the city to make that addition.
I have to admit, I don't know what you mean.
Well, to separate the budget into senior specific needs.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Other questions?
I do. Sorry, my background is in biochemistry and skydiving, so your patience is appreciated in my lack of experience. But in general tax impact, the village trustees promised us a 7% reduction in taxes, and we were given a 1.4% increase. So the town predicted a 22% increase and delivered a 22% increase. So why, given the same parameters of separation, i.e. new hires, fuel, inflation, and COVID, was the degree of error so high on this part of the city?
There was no error. At that point in time, there was no knowledge that the inflation rate would be what it was. There was also no promise. If you go back through, you will see, and as I was talking about earlier, I don't promise and I don't guarantee. The only time I've ever promised to my wife is that I had to have and to hold till death do us part. That's about the last promise I've made personally. When it comes to other things within our budget as to why there is an increase, as Regina has talked about, the increase in new positions to do things like enforce our ordinances, to help staff committees that we are talking about potentially having. This will allow for us to do some of those things, like have a rental registry, which is a conversation, for instance, that the village trustees had approximately 6 to 8 or so years ago. And what we had told the community year after year is, please wait. Once we can figure out governance, this is something we can then talk about. And so this is coming through to have that opportunity. So the increase largely, as was mentioned on page 4 of our packet, slide 3, is largely that salary and benefits.
So the town that, we're subject to the same parameters of new hires and separation, they were able to deliver very precise numbers to the people though. So my question is why weren't you able to provide the same sort of precision?
I would,
Service is 7%.
I would, yep. So they cut their services. They're also using ARPA funding to help offset their tax rate, which means next year they're going to either have to replace that revenue with something else, or they're then going to have to increase taxes by a different amount. In terms of their process beyond that, though, I would have to point you to the select board to ask them because I don't know more than that.
Okay, my next question is in regards to the fund balance for the town. It currently has a $432 deficit, and the town has $700,000. So the village, before we separated, paid taxes into the town, and it's to the order of 41% of that $700,000. So my questions are, was there a provision for the town keeping this money in the separation? And if not, why isn't the city council trying to make an attempt to collect the 41% that we put into the $700,000?
This, you're seeing us chuckle here. This was one of our conversations we had when we were separating. One of our proposals was to recoup some of that 42% that we had paid. 42. And the borderline, no, I won't, I'm trying to refrain from editorializing. The response was no, they weren't going to. We contributed to their capital fund, and we were told, nope, not getting that.
My next question is actually in regards to the capital.
The other portion.
Oh, sorry.
Jess, you mentioned that our fund balance was in the negative. That's not true. Jess, can you please correct what our fund balance is?
Yeah, so
I know it's in our audit report that we'll get to later tonight.
yeah,
But...
so Bill will be presenting on our audit shortly.
I believe I got that from the packet.
Sorry, Jason, what was that?
I said I believe I got that figure from the packet, but I may be mistaken. My apologies.
Okay. Yeah, it's not a negative. It's 430 something thousand for the positive.
Okay. My bad, excuse me.
We did very much want to get the capital money and the fund balance, but they're just under no obligation to even talk to us.
Can I make just a couple of comments here, Jason? First of all, I think that the rationale from the town's perspective is that we paid those funds as town residents, and I think that's the reasoning that they would use. That yeah, you were part of the town when you paid into the town, so now that you're going your own way, you're not town residents anymore. So that's the logic. I'm not in recounting it. I'm not saying yes or no or I agree with it, but that's the logic they used.
I get it.
One of the other things that was a bit of a surprise. It wasn't really a surprise to us, but when we were looking initially at the division of, because we knew we were going to have to. We were going to maintain the contract with the police department, and we initially thought, and our idea was that we would be dividing up the cost of the police department on the basis of our grand lists. And the town's grand list is $17 million, and ours is about $11.5 million. And so that looked like a pretty good. And that's our biggest cost altogether combined. That's like a $5 million budget. But the town said no. We want to do it per capita. We want to do it per person. We had to make some tough decisions in the course of those negotiations because we were. I mean, I'm getting a little away from the budget here, but we were looking at trying to get the separation charter online and voted on by the beginning of the legislative session. So we had to make some hard choices along the way. Back me up here, folks.
Yep.
Okay, maybe we could argue about this, but we had to make some tough choices, and so our share of the police was significantly, I think, probably about $250,000 more than
easily more
than what we had initially anticipated. So I just wanted to add those things in. That doesn't really help. But there you are. And also, I since you're a fellow biochemist, I say hi. Say French cycle.
Well, again, I've never managed a municipal budget before, but my next question is in regards to the general fund capital reserve. And as was just mentioned, we're currently in the positive $201,976, if I'm correct. Looking forward to fiscal year 2028, we're looking at a deficit of just shy of $11 million, $10,981,951. So what is the city planning to do to address this huge deficit?
Yeah, so that FY28 number is including projects that do not need to be completed in fiscal year 28, but are placeholders for projects. This spreadsheet holding all the projects is much larger than what you see here. And so that's basically lumping everything that's out into the future into that. So in terms of what we were doing, part of it is a local option tax that was approved of by the community to help provide an additional source of revenue to help compensate for the fact that our community does have infrastructure needs that we need to be able to repair. But that giant number is not necessarily saying that all of those projects need to be done within that year.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jason. Anybody else out in Zoom land? All right, I'm not seeing any other hands on Zoom land. To the room. Questions? Please.
The adult programming director.
Yep.
Well, before it was stated that there are a lot of programs for kids, but not so much for people 21 and over. And my thinking is that the seniors really need a full-time person. And I personally, I think it would be nice to have one of the kids programmers turn into, somebody who works on adult programs over at the rec center. And then we could have our own person, because we really do need our own person.
I think
somebody that understands and likes to be with seniors as opposed, to somebody who really wants to be with younger people.
Yeah, I know that with when Yuen was working with the seniors, that there was nothing but rave for what she did, the work that she did, as well as she put in extra time on her own to come in and spend more time than what she was paid for. Understand that, I hear that. What I would say is this is year one of us doing something. We can see how this goes, and we can always change that in the next budget year. This is a proposal of let's do something, see how that goes, and then if it's not going well or if it could be improved upon, let's have that conversation. I do think it'll be important that as this happens, if this budget passes, to let us know how that's going, to make sure that if it's not going well, that we have those conversations about how to improve it for the better.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I remember when
Thank
you
you.
came to an open house with I think it was your grandmother
Yes.
years ago.
Yes. Yeah. Did you have any more questions? Andy?
Way before I with the Zoom, you guys.
Oh, I didn't. Oh.
So are we heard just equally? Should I be sitting there or am I good here?
You should be heard just fine.
Okay.
If you'd like to come up though, feel free.
No, as long as it's visible and hearable.
Oh, I can hear you perfectly, but I can't see you if you want.
So, hi, my name is Annie Cooper, resident, City of Essex Junction, proud resident, City of Essex Junction. I feel like once I sat here, I'm going to talk too much. I should have stayed there. It feels to me like what you're asking of the residents as taxpayers is something like angel investors in a startup. You're asking us to give money to positions and committees that aren't defined yet. The adult position doesn't have a job description. I can't give you $56,000 for it. Sorry to say. I wouldn't do that in any level of business that I participate in. It's ridiculous. Sorry, ridiculous is not a nice word. It's not a way to do business, and it's not a way to do taxes. The same true for the committees. You're mentioning what committees might be formed with the dollars, but there's no clarity on which ones will be formed. And so to me, maybe we hold off. Maybe we, as excited as we are about all this new stuff, maybe we figure out how to define the positions throughout the year and then come back next year's budget with a better, firm, nailed down description of committees and jobs that you want. Right now, this budget is full of several items. Sorry, full of doesn't make sense. It's got several items that aren't defined, and that doesn't make sense to me. And there's a lot of, well, let's see, maybe the seniors need definition for sure. I don't know that somebody who's there as, forming adult things, maybe that's basketball leagues, maybe that's whatever. I don't know. I agree with, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, Peggy, that there needs to be a clear definition for seniors. We need to look after our seniors. I mean, when did we just when are our elders I'm 55. I put a lot of volunteer time. I mean, I just thought to myself, let's take me as an example, for the amount of volunteer time, if we were to quantify that in my rate as a resident to receive senior services, I'm 57. I don't feel, like I want to go play bingo or bridge, but I probably wouldn't do that anyway if I had more years. But certainly I would hope that you would respect the amount of time and dedication and energy, and not just that, but the amount of taxpayer dollars that a resident has put in over the years. So I'm saying for myself, as you already know, even if I just walked in here tonight and knew nothing about my own feelings about the budget already, I'm a hard no on a budget that doesn't clearly define the committees and positions. How many positions are not defined besides that one? Don't have job description besides the adult one. The adult one is a rec position?
The adult position is a recreation position within EJRP. I don't believe the building coordination role is complete with a job description. The administrative assistant may have an old one, but I would look to Regina to make sure that is what updated and be what it should be. Code officer or code enforcement officer, I doubt has a job description, and the planner, I doubt has a job description.
So if we could do it, if I could are each of them about $56,000 a year?
Let's just say give or take.
All right, that's a lot of money. That's not defined. And then the committees are $50 per meeting. How much money do we have set aside in the line item for committees that we haven't named yet?
We've named committees. We've got plenty of committees. We've got bike walk, tree.
No. The ones,
We've got-
the new ones, the three.
I'm not finished. We have bike walk. We have the tree committee. We have economic development committee. We have Essex Best. What else?
We don't have an economic development committee now.
We have plans of having an economic development committee. We can't do it without staff.
Sure.
We have, what else was there? There's something else.
Is it on the list?
Rec
Is it
advisory.
named?
Rec advisory we want to do.
There's one.
Right.
Energy, downtown committee.
Are those,
It was going to be economic development, I thought. But, and there's also the concept that I brought up, I think, at the last meeting of, well, it was around the stipends when we were talking about stipends. I think we really need to have some flexibility as we get going to see where attention is needed. We have a finite amount, generally speaking, of volunteers and people willing to come forward and do this work. And I can see it sort of operating on a quarter or half a year basis where we have a train station coming. We might need some people to do some work around that with us. And so we might need some flexibility to sort of, let's focus the people that are energetic about working with the city towards this finite but lengthy project we have. And once that project is sort of wrapping up, we can move them back towards economic development, or can move them back towards the next big project, which might be a giant development coming in on Park Street. And how do we interact with that with the community? So I think it's very important to hear what you're saying, Annie, but I think it's also very important to future-proof ourselves, make sure we have the flexibility to respond as a new city, as we're asked to do, to be able to engage the community in ways that we really frankly can't predict, and we, in my opinion, don't have time to wait to budget for.
so you want floating tax dollars
No, we have
to
floating-
random,
we have
so,
floating stipend dollars for committees that we already have. Those dollars are planned out by the number of meetings, the number of people on the committees.
yeah, I know that.
And they won't all be pulled, so people don't always ask for this.
Right. That's another point I want to get to. Thanks for reminding me. So what I'm saying is there's money added for 3 new committees. 3 is correct, the correct number, Andrew?
I think so.
Right.
Yeah, that's in the memo. It's not in the budget right now. That's what we're proposing.
Right. But they're not named committees. Those are 3 committees that we'll figure out after we pay after the taxpayers vote on this budget.
Correct. They're not defined. They don't have a charter.
Great.
They don't have a mission statement. Yep.
Great. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the committees we already have. I'm talking about the committees that we're adding on you're asking us to, again, invest and just, it doesn't feel good to me. I don't know if this is the right place to put this, but Raj's statement reminded me of it. And that is that once we agree to a budget and money goes towards the places it's going toward, it's not always, and I'm sure it'll be new. You're here, you weren't here before, Regina. Sorry, I didn't mean to speak. I know I'm supposed to talk to you, sorry. The money that doesn't get used then lands back in the fund budget.
Money that is not expended.
Right.
Then
Goes into
a fund balance.
right.
That account cannot exceed 15% of our budget. If it exceeds 15% of our
Right.
budget, then we have to figure out what to do with it. So
Right.
it's either things like give it back, or it's things like fund our capital programs, which is typically what we've done in the past of taking that money and putting that into a
Yes.
capital budget if we have that much left over.
Right. Give it back. I don't think has ever happened, has it?
Not in my time.
Me either. So what I'm saying is to be fiscally responsible myself in my house with my money. I'm not ready to invest my tax dollars and agree to this budget without clearly defined places for that money to go. And then a clear understanding at the end of a year in the tracking of that money, how it went, where it got turned down on committees and how it came back, which I don't think can really be kept well with floating committees. I don't. So thank you for the conversation.
How money gets spent is very much accounted for, or how money gets spent is very much accounted for, and you'll hear from that in the next agenda item about our audit.
With all due respect, I have been on many committees. I myself forced myself to keep track because I could see that it was getting lost in the shuffle, especially when you take a committee and you divide it into pieces. You take one committee, you divide it into 3, or divide it into 4. No one knows what anyone else is spending, and it's very hard to keep track of. I'm sure that once it gets to the place it's supposed to get to, it's very well taken care of. I'm not suggesting it's not, but there's a lot going on before it gets there. And I know it's not well looked after. Anyway, those are all the things I want to say. You're welcome to respond to me, but I feel like I've been talking a lot.
I didn't hear really a question. You told us your philosophical
Great.
stance. Thank you for sharing your
Great.
philosophical stance.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Come on up.
So, Richard Smith, I'm actually more focused on how we get more revenue into the city. And I had some concerns about it because I wasn't here in 1956 when a lot of these decisions that actually do hamper the city were decided. Global Foundries is not the company we made a tax deal with in 1956, but it's still one of our largest properties, and it's not being taxed at the normal rate of what we'd expect a resident to pay, and definitely nowhere near what we'd expect a business to pay. How did that happen? How does a sale occur between two different businesses and we not end up changing the tax rate?
I can give you a very specific answer for Global Foundries.
Yep.
I don't want to interrupt your flow, but but Global Foundries is in kind of a separate category, and they get assessed kind of separately. How many microprocessors are there in Vermont? There's only one, and so how do we go about assessing them? And they bring in their own assessment. Really, they have their own sense of it, and then we agree to it. Jess, if I'm saying something really misleading here, but and you're right, but really, basically, at this point, Global Foundries, we're assessing them basically on the basis of what their property is worth, in terms of what the manufacturing and the high-level manufacturing that goes on there. That really got completely downgraded with the elimination of the machinery and equipment tax. I don't know if that helps, but
Nope.
Yeah.
So Global Foundries is one entity that's inside that acreage area.
Mhm.
If you look at the park, I think the sign's now up to 7 names.
right.
But yeah, when you look at how the assessment works, it's still being shown as assessed well below its value for even if you were to sell it by 0.17 acre lots, parcels.
Okay.
And so I think now the idea I've heard is it creates jobs. That sounds like a state problem. not just an Essex Junction problem. So have we brought that to our reps to look for ways for them offsetting how, again, the junction is helping offset costs for everybody else, but it's not coming back into the city itself?
One thing I do know, unless I hear otherwise, Regina or Jess, if you know, my understanding is that in this reassessment, a part of the contract that was given or that was done by the town is to have another entity specifically who's going to be assessing that property by the end of fiscal year FY25, I believe. If I have the year right,
That's right.
give or take a year. But that it is one separate contract, basically with one separate entity to do that compared to all the other assessments. But their property will be reassessed again at that time period. How it got to exactly where it is, I don't know.
And if I could add, I've said many times that that's one of our biggest challenges as a city going forward is going to be getting more development onto that. It's probably the premier technology park in the state because it has its own water treatment plant. But we are kind of constrained because Greater Burlington Industrial Corporation really has kind of a lock on the development there. And that's a big challenge going forward for this city is how can we kind of break in there and get between GB. I'm sorry for GB. I see they're nice people, but I don't see them being aggressive enough on our behalf to develop that property. And I think that's a challenge going forward for the city. It's a hard one, but it's a technical one, but it's a very important one because that's really a major addition to our grand list if we can get more businesses going in there.
Continuing on that kind of front, our like 5 largest properties all bring in less money than a normal like tax parcel. And the only reason that matters to me is I own more than one parcel in the city of Essex Junction. It's also why I don't believe we should give people based on how much taxes they pay, because I think then we just have to give handies half the town at that point. So like I'd be very careful of saying how much people pay in is how much they should get from their community. But with that, we have state property that's one of our largest on West Street. Again, it's not bringing any value back to us. We have other municipalities that are holding properties within our community that are not bringing value back to us. And we share a high school that's used by 2 communities, our 4th largest property, that's bringing no value back to us. And yet, again, our tax base is asked every single time to be the one to carry that burden. And I just haven't heard how we plan on fixing those issues here in the future. And then the last big burden is when we do see increase of cost for police and we see increase of cost of like Essex Rescue and the fire department. One of our biggest 2-week periods that taxes us is used by an entity that gives us a $15,000 donation. But the amount of overtime used for everybody to cover those events far surpasses the $15,000 donation we received back for that 129-acre property.
I know that a part of that was intended also with the local option tax to try to get some revenue from what happens there because their concert ticket sales, their food vendor sales, those are the 1% of that will come back to the city in terms of some kind of compensation. The part of it is also a federal law that prohibits nonprofit and government entities from being taxed on their property. So we can't violate that. We can negotiate a payment in lieu of taxes, but that is a negotiation. And as we saw with the town, they can basically say, nope. And we're kind of in a difficult point at that point. With the police department, my understanding is that all of the police officers from the Essex Police Department who then go to the fairgrounds when there is a giant event like that, they are compensated by, they do get a bill from the town to CVE to then pay the town for their overtime.
It doesn't stay within that 129-acre property though. Like when they
right.
The increase across the community is not just within that 129-acre property.
Right. I remember talking with Radio Shack when they were here about what is it like for them, and they said, "Oh, it's our biggest time of the year," and so you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't compensate for that.
And I think that's where our conversations. I don't hear a lot of that. I hear like where can we cut costs, but like where are we going to bring in? And then the last one, I know cannabis is like a new one, but I'm pretty sure part of the state law was communities are able to also do an additional tax within selling that. And I'm not trying to jack up prices on everybody, but one of those areas that is usually taxed is tobacco and like those recreational events. Have we looked at that as another way of bringing in, because the state just released how much money it made off from taxes, and I think they're at like 1.3 million in the first 3 months of taxing that.
Yeah.
And so like that's what I'm worried about. I think my services are great. I think we're doing well there, but I don't see, and I haven't heard where we plan on bringing in extra funds to offset the costs that we do need to have to run this city.
Yeah, Raj, I've felt you the expert in cannabis at the table. I'll let that sit for a minute. Okay.
Not at all, but
Let me retake that.
We are restricted into, I mean, we're restricted to 1% local option tax on retail, of which we get less than or 64%. What is the breakdown? 70%, 60%
It's cut.
and, you know, I think to really make a dent in the way that you're talking about, the amount of retail we'd have to have for that one thing would be enormous. That said, I don't think anybody here would disagree with you.
Oh, yeah, no, you're getting only nods here.
You know,
You're right there. We're
constantly
totally
thinking
with
about
you.
this. And when I said 20 minutes ago that I would like to be able to have the flexibility to have people who are energetic and willing to come forward and really talk about this stuff in different ways and different projects, it's kind of exactly what I mean. I mean, this takes a lot of time and a lot of bodies, and it's why you're seeing some of this increase in the positions in the community development department.
Yeah.
We've put so much on hold over the last 10 years, way longer than I've been on the budget and way on the board and way longer than I've been paying attention, has been this consolidation effort and this effort, frankly, to keep the budgets down so that the town would merge with us. And so we are behind on ordinance enforcement. We're behind on looking at our ordinances. We're behind on how we interact with our neighbors when we want to enforce them. We have no concept of how expensive it's going to be for attorney's fees when somebody decides they don't want to participate with enforcement. I mean, so many things. We have so many projects coming in where the community, I mean, I just think back to the Handy Senior Building over here, fine project, but the streets, the community, the neighbors around them felt like they weren't communicated with or heard. And we have enormously, you know, exponentially bigger projects potentially coming. And none of that is waiting. We've got 100 or so or 80 apartments proposed on Pearl Street alone, and another 60 coming online soon. And the neighbors in my neighborhood, for one of those, had no idea. And that's on them. I love them all, but it's on them. Pay attention. They're listening.
like our
They're listening. They know who they are. But all these things take interaction with the municipality, and I think it's critically important as we start out the city. I'm getting on a tangent, sorry, but it's critically important, I think, as we start out the city, that we start out ready to take some of this on so we don't get further behind. Because I think it's a lot of what you're saying, it just added to this massive list that's in my head in a notebook of what we've been waiting on. And what we've asked our neighbors, as Andrew mentioned earlier, to wait on. Please be patient with us as we work through this because we have to get this done first. So yeah, I think you get complete agreement from everybody here that we have to figure out how to leverage some of that. And that even was part of the tree farm conversation. Town says we want to leave it the way it is. We say we want to be creative with it. You know, and that's kind of where we are, you know, and that's another property that's a huge chunk that the first time we talked about tree farm, I don't know, it was like 80 people showed up. It felt like almost all of them from elsewhere. People from Southern Vermont used it or something, you know, so I totally hear you. And if you want to participate in any of those conversations, this is a recruiting question. So you just sat in the hot seat and
I donate
I want this, so we're coming.
I donate about 500 hours a year, volunteer.
I know you do. I'm just kidding. I know you do. I get it.
What's wrong with 500 more?
But I'll add one thing. You know, 10 years ago, our grand list was about $11 million. 10 years later, our grand list is about 11.7. All of that, virtually all of that. Again, you can correct me if I'm wrong. These multi-story buildings that are going in here, the improvement in the property value, that's the very small little economic engine that we have driving our grand list. It is a concern because that's not a big horse to be riding into the future. And when we see big increases in our budget, you know, when the budget's going up like this and the grand list is just barely we do need to increase our grand list. And I'm a big advocate for really pushing because for the immediate future, that's where we're going to be really improving our grand list is increase the redevelopment of these older properties in the downtown.
Just one last question. Have those been realized? Because I think like the old bank was 650,000. That building now is like a $12 million building.
Yes.
So that's already been realized in the text.
They get realized before the bill, just as it's taking place. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We're right. Usually really right on top of that.
Awesome.
Right now.
And the only last point I want to make is I I know one of the things that Amber has talked about year after year is increasing our the fees that we charge for development. And that was something that was supposed to happen a couple years ago, didn't happen. So this year is also included is to help increase those fees that we get from people proposing new development to better align with what the market is. Granted, it's a drop in the bucket in the overall budget.
It also like creates the other issue that's occurring in our community of housing costs, where you kind of need to grow the housing stock, or else we're going to price everybody out of our city as well. So, okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll see you for 500 more hours. Go ahead, Heidi. Oh.
You said you have neighbors in your area that don't know about the development near them. How do we find out? Do abutters get notified, or do we all as citizens need to pay attention to what the planning commission's doing?
I'm a nerd who goes to the Essex Junction website. That's a good question that Regina obviously knows more than I do about.
Yeah, so for developments that go to the Development Review Board, the abutters are notified. And then those agendas are posted a week beforehand, just like other agendas are for the Development Review Board hearings. And there is also the legal notice in the newspapers, but that's, you know.
Hi, Carl.
Good afternoon. With regard to the tree nursery down on West Street, back in about 1970, I was on between 68 and 72. The state was willing to part with that piece of property, and we jumped right on that. And I think we had an agreement. It would be turned over to the wheels turned slowly, but it was going to be turned over to the village. I don't think with any strings attached. We might have to pay $1 or pay something for it, but that didn't really materialize because the people working there in the various state agencies, they seemed to have a pretty good lobby, and they didn't work one day. They went to Montpelier, and when they came back, they stayed. That squelched the project, so, but we did make the effort.
Yeah.
Wanted to go to the library. Do we have a head librarian anymore?
We have the director of the library, yes.
I haven't seen Wendy in a couple of years. Is she still around, or
Yep.
Much so.
where's she hiding?
She's Wendy's at the library. I don't know her schedule. She should be there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't go in all that often because I don't have any books in there that I read. I have to get my own books. I read a different, not a better book, but a different book. My wife went over the other day to return some books. Note on the door, closed for lack of staff. So are we having trouble recruiting? Whatever, I don't know what the correct number of people would be for the staff, but is there an effort to recruit to get up to whatever that minimum level should be?
That's to Regina on this one.
Yeah, I wonder if this happened to be Thursday when she was trying to drop off her books.
I think it was Saturday.
Oh.
I think it was Saturday. She had them in her hand. She walked over and came back with the same books in her hand.
I'm not sure about what was happening.
And I'm not throwing that out as a criticism. It's just a point of information. I go in there and there doesn't seem to be a lot of people in there anymore. I just wander in, random and check the papers and maybe see what the new book set selection is. But we don't seem to be doing some good there. Is that a same problem with other departments within the city?
About a lack of staff,
Well,
or
no, inadequate staff, whatever they determine any department would need to be at a minimum working level.
The other departments, unless I'm mistaken, they're the only ones who have had that request for additional staffing.
I don't know if it's an addition, but just get it back up to par.
Yeah, no, the other departments are staffed as well as they can be. I don't know if we still have a vacancy in Public Works, as they seem to regularly be looking, as that's a hard area to fill.
We're,
They seem to, they seem to, whatever their level is, they seem to be turning out the work. I mean,
Yeah.
I commend them for their effort.
Yep.
I think you mentioned something about $20,000 of the seniors.
Yep.
I hope that isn't in your budget.
That is within a separate fund that is completely outside of like our general fund. It's in a secret lockbox, if you will, but it has its own special housing area.
I don't know why the seniors lost it. It's probably not a bad idea that it did come over here where it's hopefully safer, but those funds, I told the city manager here a little while ago that those funds were left by seniors. I think they're mostly women, the two women left me in their wills. And one was 20,000+ and one was something less.
Yep.
And we did use some of that money.
Yep.
To refurbish the interior over here. New flooring and some things with the kitchen, replacing some like the dishwasher, I think was one thing. And I mean, not huge expenses, but
Right.
it was senior money. It wasn't tax revenue. Competing with other.
I was trying to find where it is specifically within our packet, but within our audit report, there is a specific line item that talks about a senior special fund, where it's in its own special line item. That's I jokingly call it a special lockbox, but it's to make sure that that money is not accessed for things like general operating expenses or things like buying pizza for staff.
Get this organization, back on its feet.
Yep.
We may have a use for that money.
Great.
Well, certainly will be.
Yeah.
And it might be improvements, and you can coordinate it with whatever the plan is for remodeling. And maybe we can work on something like that in a cooperative effort.
That'd be a great conversation to have when we're ready.
We don't have anybody to have a conversation with right now. You saw these two ladies here tonight, but there are some others out there that they aren't getting any younger, just for what it's worth.
Yeah.
I don't know what our average age is. I think it might be 80 something. That's maybe high, but we don't have that anymore. We're working on it. Other than that, this is going to be a transition year, and it's going to be in flux, rather fluid for the next 12 or 15 months. I think most of the community understands that.
It can't hurt if you want to help share that, though.
Well, but I mean, I think they're willing to cut some slack.
Yep.
That otherwise they might be a little more aggressive about.
Yeah. Yep.
And the other thing about the budget, none of us can do anything about it. There are people in this community, like every other, that are hurting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They are hurting. They can't pay I know our church over here, they have a fund that they help try to pay some of the heating utilities bills.
Yep.
In addition to the food pantry.
Right.
Things like that, but you aren't going to get blood out of a stone.
Nope.
They're already hurting, so. George mentioned about the base here, the grand list.
Yeah.
That's what it's broken against. Anyway, thank you very much, and
Thank you, Carl.
keep going on it. Catch you later.
Great. Already spoken, Annie. Harlan?
I'd love to get you guys out of here in 3 hours, but who knows? I just wanted to be, or maybe some clarifying information from a conversation that happened earlier on the budget. There are 3 committees that are identified that potentially are going to be put in place that are not formed at the moment.
Correct. They
but
don't
may-
currently exist.
But could potentially be in the budget.
Yes.
I feel like the names of these committees, could somebody remind me of them? One of them is the Rec Advisory Council
Rec Advisory, Downtown Board, and Energy.
and Energy. So I feel like there's some description within the name. My question is, if we don't put them in the budget, let's say we vote down the budget because we don't want you to put that money. If we don't put that money in the budget, what would be the earliest that these committees could be put in place to help us? Would that be July of 24, June of 24?
It's a great question. One of the joys of public budgeting for a municipality is that this process starts in advance, and if we have to budget for the worst case, budget for the highest amount we think we might need, because come July 1, if we don't have that, we can't do it.
Because I believe the police department on the town side, which we also pay into, holds 2 positions that they budget for every year for policemen that they've been trying to recruit but have not had the success.
Yep.
So that's the way that a budget would work, correct? That we would need to get this money in place so that if we were able to define the parameters of committees or this adult recreation position,
yep,
we would need the money in place so that we could enact them in a timely manner to serve our community.
It's just like why when we budget for health insurance, we budget for somebody who's going to have, say, children, so that way, if we hire somebody who does, we can actually afford to pay their benefits instead of budgeting for a single person and then hiring somebody who has a family and need to pay that higher amount and trying to scramble to find that money. So yes, if for example, the budget were to be voted down, the question that would come to us is why, and most likely it's because people would want it to be less. So we have to figure out what to cut.
And those committees wouldn't actually be in place. Obviously, we need them. They've been identified. These are committees that we're going to have to put in place. Those committees wouldn't be put in place until the parameters of what their responsibilities would be, including the adult program person.
Right.
Those job descriptions and those parameters would be put in place. Then the committees would go out for volunteers, or the position would be advertised with a description, and the money would be in place to put those in place in a timely manner for the community.
Right. Once it's known that the money is going to be there, then we could take the time to do that. Personally speaking, I don't want to spend the time creating a committee, creating a job description, doing those kinds of things if we aren't going to have the funding there. Because otherwise our time can be spent doing other things.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Harlan. All right. No other hands. We will go ahead and look at what we have next on our agenda. So we'll close the public hearing and go into business item 6A. And 6A, introduce Chris Yuen, Community Development Director.
Yeah, hey, Chris.
Hello, I'm right here.
He's going to need to be a little bigger.
Let me see if I can do that.
How are you, Chris?
I'm pretty good. Good. Very glad to join you guys over here. Yeah, Regina, are you gonna say a few words, or should I just introduce myself?
I will say a few words. So, Chris Yuen started on February 6th, I think it was, and it's been so awesome. It's really been a huge help so far. We have already thought through some process improvements on the internal DRB review front, as well as the development review board front, to try to get ahead of some of these sort of problems that have been happening on the back end. And it's just been really great to have him here. And I also am incredibly impressed, because I don't know how often you've biked in already, but just right at the bat, biking in and taking the bus. Woohoo!
Nice.
How far are we talking, Chris?
From downtown Burlington.
All right.
Yeah.
We've got good service linking the two cities, so I'm glad to use it.
There you go.
Great. Happy to hear that. Appreciate you helping to reduce the carbon footprint.
So yes, yeah, I've been with the city now for just over 2 weeks, and I'm learning a lot. And but previous to this, I was working in transportation planning. I've spent about 5 years in actually specifically public transport planning for cities throughout the United States. My firm was helping to redesign transit networks and redesign way the routes would be run, and how service was distributed with a lens on equity and on access to opportunity. Over the last year, I've pivoted more towards active transportation before landing here at the city, where I'm very excited to participate and be a part of the conversations about expanding housing options and working through other transportation and planning goals and housing goals that we have in the city. So feel free to contact me at any time if you have questions about planning, about community development, and I will make sure to get the best answers I can to you as soon as I can.
Appreciate that, Chris. Thrilled that you're here, and look forward to taking you up on that opportunity, as well as just having your eyes, your brain, and your thoughts in terms of what we in the community can do to help develop Essex Junction.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Does anybody have any particular questions or things you want to say?
Chris, where are you from originally?
Well, previous to this, I was actually in Portland, Oregon, where I've spent 5 years, and previous to that, I grew up in Vancouver, BC, in Canada. I was actually born in Hong Kong, so yeah, I've spent a fair share of time in a bunch of different places, mostly on this continent.
So freezing cold doesn't scare you a bit, right?
I did do grad school in Toronto, and
There you go.
that's it's a little similar there.
All right. Wow.
So this is nothing.
Yeah.
What have you found the most challenging in the first 2 weeks?
I think learning about all the existing rules and why they exist, trying to get a history on the intent of different regulations in the land development code, and trying to get a feel for what the community wants going forward, especially with the proposed changes, updates to the LDC, and how that relates to the official plan, and how the city looks now as it has just become a city. Getting a grapple on all these things together has been a challenge, but there's plenty of good expertise already in house. Terry Haas, in my department, has been around for a very long time, and she really has provided the institutional continuity that has helped me come on board.
Great.
Yeah, that's great. I would say, as you're looking at those rules, and if you find yourself questioning, why does this exist, or why is it this way, please push back.
Certainly, I'm coming up with the list of things like that, and working my way through trying to understand things, and suggest ways that the city can improve in the future.
Sounds wonderful.
I think I'd love to hear your thoughts on the in the proposed LDC that you've probably been pouring through. Some of the suggestions and specifics on development and bike infrastructure, and some of the new proposals they have there for new building. And I was trying to get through it and trying to figure out if we'd actually, with some of the definitions and some of the building sizes, if we'd actually ever see any of it in what we have left to develop, and how that all related to what we're looking at in the next 10 or 15 years. But we haven't gotten here. We haven't reviewed it as a board yet. We've read it, or tried to read it. Tried a number of times to read it, usually around 9 o'clock at night. I'm having trouble sleeping. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, but I'd love to connect with you sometime and talk about that. I'm really into making sure an active, healthy, accessible, walkable, bikeable community. And really thrilled to hear that you've been biking in through blizzards and whatnot to come to work. So you're gonna bike tomorrow morning, I'm assuming.
Tomorrow might be a bus day.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm certainly catching up on reading up on those proposed amendments right now, and also comparing them to what I know from best practices from cities around the region and around the country. So yes, I'm happy to be in touch about that, and we'll be moving that to council when we're ready to do so.
Great, thanks.
Great.
And I'll just add that Chris, we will also come forward with a recommendation to appoint Chris as the zoning administrator. We're bringing that to the planning commission first in the early March, and so then that'll come to the council on March 22nd.
Great.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Regina. Chris, thank you for applying and saying yes to the job opportunity. Thrilled that you're here and thrilled to see and hear more from you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And so next up, we have the fiscal year 2022 audit report with Bill Kaiser. Did I say that? Did I say the last name right? Great.
Yes, you did. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Bill.
Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Jess, do you want to go first, or want me to just start right out?
All I want to say, Bill, is this was a challenging audit because I was not here for most of the year. So it took a little bit longer than normal. Thanks to Bill for his patience and helping me work through this process. And also, I came to the village, to the city. Obviously, I looked at financials before I even applied for the job here. The city has always been a community that others look to, and an example, great example that's set. So it was exciting for me to come here and kind of dive into it. Also, this is our last audit as a village.
Yep.
So next year's audit will say City of Essex Junction. All right, Bill, you can take it away.
All right. Thank you very much, Jess. Yeah, and I'm sorry if I get caught between city and village a few times during the my presentation, but yes, officially a city as of July 1st, 2023. So congratulations on that.
Don't worry, we're still going through that ourselves, and we'll get you the version
Yes.
later.
Work in process.
Yep.
Now, so my name is Bill Kaiser. I'm a principal at Cattell Brannigan and Sargent. We've been doing the Village of Essex audit for the last, I think, 4 or 5 years now. As Jess had mentioned, the audit for 2022 on her end was the challenge. However, we were able to issue a clean, unmodified opinion for the 2022 audit. And overall, from my perspective as an auditor, it was a success, which is a big plus for the village becoming a city. Certainly a year of transition where halfway through the year, separation had to be realized from the town, as well as a mid-year transition of finance directors going from Sarah Macy to Jess, as well as bringing in a new city manager in Regina. But overall, the finance department and Jess's team did a very nice job preparing for the audit. She's been through these processes before, with Milton most recently. So she knew what we were looking for. And as we discussed while we were doing the field work, she has followed Sarah Macy's footsteps in the past. So she was pretty familiar with how things were working previously. The big difference between the 2021 audit and the village audit for 2022, you'll notice there wasn't a single audit for this fiscal year. A single audit is required if there are grant expenditures of over $750,000, and the village fell under that threshold this year. The big difference in a single audit is the testing of internal controls and making sure that the internal controls are adequately in place. While an audit still performs walkthroughs of internal controls, it's not the actual testing of those controls. However, we did do some testing when we first started the audit, we were under the impression there would be a single audit. That later on changed. Overall, though, we did note that Jess's the internal controls in place for the village were sound. And just as an auditor, I wanted to remind the council that while we are performing many walkthroughs throughout our audit testing, the audit necessarily is not designed to prevent or detect fraud. If fraud was found during the audit, we would certainly bring it to the council's attention. No such issues were noted this year. And the purpose of the audit mainly is to just ensure that the financial statements are not misleading and that they're materially fairly stated from a financial standpoint. And with the unmodified opinion, we had no such issues where the financial statements currently are not materially misstated. The government-wide financial statements, as I've talked about in the past years, are on the accrual basis of accounting, similar to the way a business would report its financials. The net investment of capital assets is $22 million of the just over $25 million in total net position for the government funds. You will notice that the village at June 30, 2022 has a very low cash balance of just over $1,000. I want to note that because right now there is a receivable due to from the town of just over around $10.3 million. So that is cash that is available to the village in the town's funds. With the separation currently in process, the village has established some bank accounts. However, as of now, those funds have not been fully transferred over just because the village is working out some implementation on software for AP processing mainly. But I spoke with Jess recently, and I think the plan is to have a lot of the cash back into the city before fiscal year 2023. You'll also see that the town is still maintaining its the accounts receivable on property taxes for the village. And it is expected that as of July 1st, 2023, for fiscal year 2024, those receivables will be going back onto the village side as well. So next year's financial 2024's financial statement specifically will look a lot different from what we're looking at today. The fund financial statements, which come after the government-wide statements, are more on a modified accrual basis of accounting, and they fall more aligned with your budget for the general fund. Again, the receivables are low and mostly consist of billed grant revenues. And that's because the property taxes, like I mentioned, are on the town's books. There is an increase in deferred revenue from prior year, and that is due to the ARPA funds that were received of about $1.6 million through June 30th. And the council has not, there's been no approved use of those funds yet, but it is disclosed in the footnotes that those are available to be spent in future years. The equity restrictions for the fund balance you can find on pages 27 and 28. And this is the earnings from past years that are available to be spent going forward. The village currently has a general fund balance of $822,000. And of that amount, about just over $150,000 has been assigned for specific future expenditures. I believe about $50,000 is assigned specifically for the planned deficit for 2023, a budgeted fund deficit in 2023. And overall, general fund operations for the fiscal year 22 resulted in a decrease in fund balance of $42,000. The proprietary funds are the next set of financial statements. These are more business funds and meant to be self-sustaining. They consist of the water, sanitation, and wastewater funds, as well as EJRP. All of those funds in 2022 resulted in a positive increase in net position. And then those financial statements are followed by the footnotes. These are more detailed explanations of many of the numbers in the financial statement balances, more specifically the allocations of fund balances, the fund balance assignments, capital asset details, and a summary of the debt held by the village at year end. Those footnotes are followed by then required supplementary information and other additional supplementary schedules. Probably the most useful as a member of the community would be the budget to actual schedules, which is required supplementary information. These schedules show the budgeted to actual results for the year by department. And then the other supplementary information highlights the non-major fund balance sheet and income statement that tie to the fund financial statements in the beginning of the financial. That's all I have, but I want to open it up for questions to the council as well as Jess and Regina.
Thank you for that. Jess, I saw that you sent an email earlier about the acronym that I butchered earlier, and I'm not going to try to say it again. Do you just want to talk very briefly as to what that is and what was in here? Because yeah.
Sure. So the audit report that was originally included in the meeting packet for tonight did not include the management's discussion and analysis. Basically, that's my report that I prepared that summarizes all of this other gobbledygook at the end that no one can understand. Translating it to, and even still, it's not super easy for everyone to understand. So that has been updated. It is included in the hard copies that we have available here at the office. And it also has been updated on the website, so that report is included in the PDF that's on the website.
And I apologize for that. That was a complete oversight on our end. I opened the financial statement today and noticed that. So I sent that right to Jess. So my apologies there.
It's all good. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and Jess, I read it just before I came in. You give yourself credit. It was pretty clear. It was very, very well done. It was good.
Bill, so you mentioned at the very beginning, I think you said that it was a clean, unmodified opinion. Can you put that into lay people speak?
Yeah, so basically how I went into after that, how the financial statements are not materially misstated. We didn't have to disclose, there was no disclosure in our opinion for any issues that we found where, for example, we found a material misstatement in the town, the village did not want to make the adjustment to correct the misstatement. There were no significant internal control issues that we were made aware of during the audit procedures.
Great.
And no significant material adjustments that were made.
Great. Thank you for that. If you had to distill all of this into 2 other, say, bullet points to somebody who does not look at a audit report on a regular basis, what would you say are important things to point out in just those 2 big takeaways?
One is the cleanliness of the audit or the trial balance before we start the audit, especially in the general fund. I think when you look month to month and track your budget, and specifically the department heads are tracking their budget on a month to month basis, the numbers from what I'm looking at are accurate. So we're not coming into the audit and seeing a lot of errors that we're having to adjust. So as the council is looking at figures throughout the year, those figures pre-audit are accurately stated, is what I found. Second, I would say the dedication of the staff that I had noticed from Jess and her commitment to working with Courtney at the town throughout the year, as well as Dan during the audit. Dan is the new town finance director. They're still having to work together and with the accounts payable. And I think that is a big part of 2022's audit and still in 2023. So I think that's another highlight.
That's great. I appreciate that. My last question, and then I'll turn it over to the other counselors here. I've asked this in previous years as well, especially as we've gone through separation. I assume you can confirm that it's very easy to tell which dollars are at this point in time village dollars and which dollars are town dollars. and that is all very well and cleanly accounted for, and there's no concern that all dollars for the village now city have been accounted for, and there's not been any inappropriate use or access by the town or vice versa.
Yes, everything that we looked at, we did not see any such issues. They're actually very easy to identify. With the GL account coding, the town has a specific 3-digit code, and the village has its own 3-digit code, one starting with 200, the other with 100. And over the course of the audit, we look at many invoices, some material, others not as material, but so large and small dollar value invoices. And we did not come across anything where it was allocated to the town or inappropriately allocated to the village as well.
Great.
I will also note on that there are due to, due froms that basically each fund has a receivable or payable balance for payments that go back and forth, and those all do reconcile to each other, which might, if they didn't, might be an alert to an expense being picked up by the village inaccurately or by the town inaccurately.
I appreciate that, especially with the 10 million due to or due from.
Yeah,
that's a material amount.
Yes, not due to.
Right. Raj, George?
I'm good. Thank you.
Good.
I'm good. I really appreciate all the effort that was done here.
Jess, is there anything we haven't asked? Is there anything that you think is important that we know? Or Regina, is there anything else any questions you have or anything else that you think is important that we know?
The only thing I'll draw attention to, because it did happen during this fiscal year, is that so again, last annual meeting, voters did approve to increase the unassigned fund balance policy to 15%. Previously had been 10%. So that is incorporated in the MD&A and in the audit footnotes and everything this year as well.
Great. All right.
All right.
Any other questions? Great.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
You as well. And Jess, I think you're still here with the discussion of FY24 proposed budget and capital program budget. It's like we were planning to have you be here for the night.
Nice to hear, by the way. Congratulations. It's nice
Yes.
to hear great feedback. So,
Thank you for saying that, Raj. I missed that point.
sorry, I stole your.
No, it completely,
Close to me.
yeah, no. No, that wasn't a criticism, that was an honest thank you. Thank you for thanking the staff who do this, and so, yes, thank you.
Okay. So you've got a memo in your packet. It's fairly similar to the memo from last time, where we have just identified a few other things that we are recommending that you include in the budget itself. Some of that is around actual expenses for the election for the last 2 years. Those costs have been larger than the 15,000 budgeted, and we've been able to look and check to make sure that the share of the school district is accounted in that number, and so we still think that you need to add that 17,000 in there. We've talked about the what we're estimating to be about $10,500 for the additional committees. Again, what we're saying there is just that those are stipend dollar amounts for potential committee members. No postage line for the clerk's office, so just a small amount of money there. And just the potential thinking about other spaces that we might need going forward. Not as confident or sure about that one, but just something to think about as well. So, and then just schedule wise, oh, sorry, this is also exciting information that's on here. I'm looking at my last meeting's version instead of what's in your packet. So, Jess, I should let you tell this information since you're the one who collected it, not me.
I was very excited to dig into this one. So we have under our belt now a full quarter of local option tax revenue. And for the quarter October through December, we came in at just about $240,800. So I've been back and forth with my contact at the state, and her and I kind of hashed out a method to project a year's worth of revenue. And so with her coordination, we are now safe to assume that our annual revenue could be about $745,000. And basically what we're doing is we're taking that one quarter that we know of so far, factoring that includes holiday sales. So that quarter is higher than what we would normally see. So what we did was we took the other 3 quarters of the year, reduced that number by 30% to come up with the annual amount.
This is exciting.
It's way more than what was projected when you all and Sarah started this work a few years ago. So it's really exciting.
Absolutely. Trying to withhold that and yeah, when I saw your email, you were not alone.
Yeah.
Thinking about things like the train station and other uses, other capital needs. Yep.
Well, if I can jump in, I'm looking at the capital project list going out to FY28.
Yep.
And you guys, I know that probably there's all kinds of plans of what we can do with the money as soon as we get, but I think you would agree with me that the biggest thing that we can do with a great big chunk of that money is start tucking it away, because you've got altogether, looks like about $7 million in capital projects. And I'll tell you, Andrew knows, we back in 2012 took out a $3.5 million bond because prior to that, prior boards have kept taking all the capital project lists and pushing them and pushing them and pushing them, and all of a sudden we were at the foot of the mountain. We couldn't push them anymore, and the only way we get on top of it was to take a bond. And I would, as I leave the board, the best advice I could give the rest of you, please take as much of that money and don't think of new stuff you can do with it. Stick it away in a capital improvement fund, because you're going to need it. And as I've said before, one big rain event like happened 2 years ago, and that was a major bullet that we dodged, because FEMA came in and wrote $1 million check. But that would have taken everything out of your capital. You would have had nothing, and you would have had to take out a bond, because you can't have a whole part of the city just cut off by floodwater. So please keep your capital project list in mind. Don't get real excited about this, because you're going to think how much money you're going to put away.
Oh no, I came from a community that had lots of deferred everything. So I am super familiar with that. I mean, we going as far as bonding for paving.
Yes.
So,
you don't want to do that.
Yeah, don't want to do that. I am like so averse to that.
Yeah.
And I will also say, to George's point, this money is sitting in a totally separate fund. I created a special revenue fund so that it is not mingled with any other general fund. So it'll be easy to track and just make transfers back and forth.
Yep. And it does beg that question of, within a relatively short time period, I don't know how well to define short and or relative, we do need to define how we're going to use this, so that way we can report back to the community how we plan to use this money.
I think we all, yes, I'll just leave it there. That's great. No?
Or another 500-hour committee.
No?
No? All right.
Richard's still here.
Great. So in terms of the questions that we have that are right in front of us here, the potential need for the additional space, you mentioned that somewhere between that 6 and 12,000. That's one of those things where I think that having to take some time to think about what might be realistic, what might be needed, how much that might. I would look to you to try to bring that into something a little bit closer, and say this is what the recommendation would be. To me, to just throw out a number, I feel like I'd be basically throwing spaghetti on the ceiling and seeing what's stuck.
Yeah.
And I guess even just to further, one of the things in our packet here is that we can either approve the budget tonight or we can wait until March 8th. Personally, I'd like to see us wait until March 8th, use every moment we can to make sure that we've got the best budget in front of us, that we've received all the public input that we can in this process. And then on that March 8th meeting, that's the deadline. We must make a decision at that point in time.
Yep. Sounds good.
Okay. So on this portion, typically we've had our discussions. We've then turned it over to public comment. Do you want to flip this a little bit differently? See if we have any other comment that we haven't already received in the budget, and then have our discussion?
Sure.
Sound good?
Let's live crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, dangerous. All right. So last time we went to Zoom land first. So why don't we come into the room here? Does anybody have any questions? We haven't talked about the budget yet today. About the budget you have, Heidi?
Yeah. What was that amount that you guys estimated for the 1% again?
For the year? For the year? Or for that has been received?
No, for the year, the estimate.
Approximately 745,000.
And that's our share after the state keeps its cut.
Yep. Annie?
And we had 882,000, I wasn't giving it exactly, that's 882,000 in our fund budget. That the auditor was talking about, sorry, Jen, I'm sorry.
That's the fund balance at the end of the year, the balance in the general.
882,000, and the sole manner in which money ends up in the fund balance is through tax dollars that sifted, I'm right, George, right, that sifted out through the other side, that didn't get spent, that ended up being left over after we voted in on our budget.
Any revenue source. It does not need to just be tax dollars. It could also be grant funding that hasn't been spent.
Sure.
It could be any other type
Sure.
of revenue, but yes, including tax money.
So $882,000, so it's $1 million. So again, my point about our budget and how much money keeps ending up in like slush funds or the fund balance, or this is not monopoly, this is not something that you are owed to build the city that you want to build.
Mhm.
It's money that we're paying in taxes entrusted to you to look after. So I think, quite honestly, right now, the way that the money's being viewed does feel like you view it as not only you in particular, Andrew, I'm just talking to you as the president. It feels very much as though our money is being used as monopoly money, and it's very exciting to have the new city, and it's great, we're all, everyone's thrilled about it.
Mhm.
But quite frankly, 882,000 in a fund budget, that's almost $1 million. And I can't believe that I personally voted up the fund budget to 15%, and sitting here kicking myself a little bit. But quite frankly, no, they're slowed down.
So the fund balance is the rainy day fund.
Right.
Whereas if you recall from a couple of years ago when we had the Halloween flood that washed out the
Yeah.
culverts at Densmore,
Yeah.
literally shut down the road.
Sure.
The road was engulfed by the river. Had FEMA not come through,
Yes.
we would not have had the hundreds of thousands of dollars that it would have taken
Sure,
to do
I
that.
heard George
And so this is a portion as to why the best practices within the government accounting standards is to go to 15 to 25% for fund balance.
Okay.
So I hear you saying that you feel that it's a slush fund, trying to use your word. That is the experts telling us that the very minimum as to what this should be. And we're at that very minimum low end.
Fair about the 15%. I appreciate that because I do feel better about it in this statement. And I heard George's
Mhm.
say, it's still not sitting well with me. It's not, it doesn't feel right to me, the way the budget is being done. It feels, it feels like I said, I don't need to repeat it again. It doesn't feel like we're really and truly understanding taxpayer dollars. And I'm probably not landing my comments in exactly the right space, and I appreciate the interaction about the fund balance.
Mhm.
But I'm just thinking to myself, money up front for unplanned, I'm not here for it. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Can I think this is relevant that there's a distinction between that full 822,000 and the actual unassigned. So there's much less, which is only actually 7.26% of our FY23 budget. So we're really pretty low in comparison to what you even had as a policy before.
I know it's in our packet somewhere. I just tried to do words fine and I couldn't do it. So that's why I'm sorry if I'm having bad interpersonal communication skills and I wasn't looking at you, but I was trying to also find what the number is in here.
Yeah. It's easiest if you go to 8A, so page 194 of the packet.
Thank you.
Reflect on that for a minute. Page 194 of the packet. Oh, it's almost at the end.
So, thank you. That's why I couldn't find it. 'Cause I
Point
thought it was
taken,
far higher up.
Raj.
No, that's not it. No. You could do bigger.
So in the fund balance, we can have funds that are set aside for some purposes and some that are not set aside. The ones that are set aside are for things like health reimbursement accounts, termination benefits. So if somebody's going to leave, we can then make sure that we have the benefits or the funding to pay them for their time that they are due for like accrued sick time, things like that. So in terms of how much of that fund balance is unassigned, literally sitting there that could be spent for another purpose, unless I'm misreading this, is $457,951,000, which is that 7.26% of the budget.
I apologize. When you guys were laughing over there, I lost a second and I didn't keep looking at you and I heard you. And I'm sorry that I wasn't present to you when you were telling me, but I did hear you. Still $500,000 and I think I'm just making my point in the wrong location.
Okay.
My point still is what I want to say. It's the same as I was saying before. I'm still saying the same thing. And I appreciate clarity on these pieces.
Yep.
And it's still $500,000. It still makes me nervous how we're putting it in and not making sure how it goes out there. The other group. Thanks.
Okay.
And thanks for that work, Regina.
Yeah, Regina, Jess, thank you for pointing out what the number is. I appreciate that and the page. Any other questions on the budget? Seeing nothing in the room, going to Zoom land. If you have any questions on the budget, please go ahead, raise your hand. RSM, I think that's Raisa. If it's not, I apologize.
Thank you. It is me. Sorry, I know you've gone over this so many times and I greatly appreciate it. Last year, for example, right around this time, there was a discussion about whether we should be purchasing masks. And I believe that ended up not happening, but there was an earmarked amount for those masks. So rather than that amount going directly back to whatever line budget it would have been as unused funds, it goes into this overall fund. Is that correct?
With that one, no, because that was actually the ARPA funding. So
Okay.
It's not our property tax dollars. It's the federal money that came to us. So yes, the grand scheme of things, our taxes are somewhere in there, but it's not the Essex Junction municipal taxes for that.
Okay, thank you. So some things do, some things don't. Grant funds, ARPA, et cetera, is handled differently than, I'm trying to think of anything. Okay, if we were able to have done the kind of party sort of annual event where we'd have dinner and there'd be funds for that, if we, this year when we didn't do it, if we had had money put aside for it, it would then go into this sort of general rainy day kind of fund. Am I at all close?
Yes, that is absolutely correct. That would be money that would be paid for from the general fund that would have come into the general fund that did not go to that purpose. So that would go into the fund balance.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And don't feel that it isn't, or that it's wrong for this to be confusing. I'm going to be very honest with you. I teach a graduate course in public and nonprofit budgeting to master's level students, and this is some of the things that we talk about, and it's confusing to them. So this is a confusing topic, and that's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We did that 40,000 ARPA that had been set aside for the masks.
It's ARPA. It's just, it's sitting in ARPA as we wait to figure out our timeline for building or redoing the building here, as that's likely going to take or end up where that's going to go. Anybody else in Zoom land? All right. So I think in terms of our the proposed budget that we have, the only other unresolved portion is with our stipends. And I'm just trying to pull up this part of our agenda. So with where things were left, and George, you provided that memo on your thoughts, it was pretty clear that George and Dan were not in agreement with going up to the amount that was proposed. Was there a different proposal?
Yeah. You know, I've done a lot of speaking with people in the community and listened to some of our meetings back. Had some interesting advice from other folks. And I think, you know, cutting that back and spending some time, so doing a more combined approach where we're being more intentional about exploring what we can do to welcome and even develop interest in the positions and in the work. Thinking towards the portion of our charter that discusses the commission, or I don't know what to call it. I'm going to call it a commission committee that is looking at how our community is governed. That has to happen within 3 years. So we'll finish this budget, and the next budget we do for 25, we'll have to have some money in that. And presumably then some guidance and some effort on us to give them a charge from the charter through us to that. And really kind of looking at how much of that work can be included in that effort. So if they're spending a year or 6 or 9 months and then reporting out the last 3 months, right? Then having that hopefully be part of that. Like, what can we do structurally over and above dollars? So I'm thinking of backing down quite a bit. And again, I want to stress that the 6,500 number, it was calculated on a really good report, but I never intended it for it to be the answer and the one source. So I think that thinking about that and how we can really kind of get to some of really find some creative solutions and look at how we operate in a more holistic way. So I guess I'd propose something more like 2,500, which was an increase of 1,000. That would cover, for instance, that would cover babysitting for the meetings, 24 meetings, for instance, if there were a couple hours each, which we're getting a little long in the tooth here for this one. So that would be what I'm thinking. And then an intentional effort, which I don't mind working through as a council member, to really kind of find other people, other employees or other counselors and or trustees or select board members in other communities, and really kind of explore this. Amber had a really good suggestion the other day I'm gonna put you on the spot because I can barely see you. You know, talking to there's quite the cache of folks running for Burlington City Council. And I thought that was an interesting point you made about, have you reached out to talk to all of them? The one thing I'll say about that is, which I said to you too, is they have a $5,000 stipend and it's Burlington. So there's always a million people that want to, but I think it's a valid point that we really need to. And I just want to say too, that I also don't think I ever said that this was the one and only, you know, and that it is not about how much, it's not solely about how much a city councilor is paid. You know, it wasn't the dollar amount to receive payment for the service. It was recognizing that there are costs to doing this for some people and trying to address those through that. So there's a interesting nuance there that we can all get caught up on, I think. And the last thing I'll say is it's not intended to say that anything any of us are doing now or the motivations or intentions of anybody that'll run in the future or has served in the past are to become called into question for, you know, I think there are an awful lot of people out there that want to do something for their community, and I think we need to hear from them. And some of them want to serve and just don't see it as possible. And that's what, you know, and to Dan's point, still have to get elected, which is no small thing. So that's all I have to say about it.
I feel that my position really hasn't changed. Raj, I get it. You know, honestly, obviously, I completely appreciate where you're coming from and what your desire is here. But I'm going to just put that aside for a moment and just say, I think we've gotten a sense that the budget is already pretty packed, and it's packed with stuff that I would describe as, I mean, in my mind, I think discretionary and non-discretionary. I mean, fire safety, police, stuff like that. But then stuff that is aspirational, like we hope to create a committee. We hope to create, you know, have a rec committee and an economic development committee or whatever it's going to be. And so we're going to put money in the fund for that. So we have a lot of aspirational funding that's already in the budget. And I am concerned, even though I heard you, Andrew, we didn't promise there would be a tax cut, a tax break from separating from the town. Nevertheless, I think the implication was there, which we did not do to quell, that there would be some kind of a significant tax savings. And that didn't happen. Now, we know the reason it didn't happen. We know all the reasons, multiple reasons. But nevertheless, we wound up giving people, I wouldn't say it's a huge tax increase, but it's the kind of typical tax increase that I've normally seen. And but so I think we were in dialogue with so many people in a positive way. I think it's going to be a hard pill to swallow that we didn't get much of a tax break, and we're actually getting a tax increase from separating from the town. And I think now is not the time to also give ourselves a pay raise. You're not going to be in every household to be able to explain why the city council is getting a pay raise. And I just think as I head off into the horizon, I would just say, you guys, you know, you've got to weigh your responsibilities. Yes, you have a responsibility to try to identify systemic barriers, but you also have a responsibility to spend money really wisely. And in my mind, I think right now I would like to see a little bit more thought. I like some of the stuff that you were talking about looking at other ways to get people in. I would like to have seen more of that before I vote on giving a big tax increase for the city council.
How much is the 7,500 is about 0.1%, right? Yeah. $1.80. This would be about $1.80.
I know, but
not insignificant. But
no, it's not. But
I wouldn't call it a.
Yeah, I wouldn't. But I think we're at a point where like, you know, we can always say on an $11 million budget, well, an extra 20 grand, an extra 15 grand, an extra 30 grand. What's the big deal? But those monies add up.
I guess we're differing, which is absolutely fine. We're differing on what a priority is going forward, I guess. And I don't think we're going to agree on it. So for me, a priority is sort of future-proofing the community to make sure we're starting out set up structurally to make sure we're hearing from everybody we need to hear from, and we're represented well. To me, that's a commitment worth $1.80 a year on the average homeowner, over and above whatever else we're suggesting. I don't believe the community is going to say no to that. I have heard one neutral question about it and an awful lot of support for it. Because I think when this community here's what the purpose is. It's not untrue that we're giving ourselves a raise. That's how the thing works. That's how it works, you know, and we're not asking to put it in the charter. So we're able to revisit this year after year. And yeah, I think we've talked it through. I totally, and that's not, none of that is to say that I don't hear everything you're saying and understand it. And I think about it, you know, because partly, and this isn't partly because you've got a lot more experience at this than I do. And I'm not trying to, not blow smoke. I think it's a hard thing to propose this, and it's a hard thing because it's hard to know and measure, right? If it's had any, you know, we can put money towards a grant program for development and figure out if it's going to work, if it worked. You know, this is going to take a lot more nuance and trust to do it, and I recognize that.
I mean, putting money, you know, coming up with some idea of putting money into some kind of outreach that educates people or something like that is one thing. I mean, I guess what your statement was about setting us up to make sure we hear from everybody. I agree, we need to do that. I guess to crystallize the point of disagreement is, I disagree with how you want to achieve that. I think there are other ways to achieve that besides giving the council a pay raise. That's all. I'm not disagreeing with the goal. I'm just disagreeing with the means. And I'm just one person, regardless of how I could have been here 50 years. That doesn't make my voice any more important than the other four of you. So that's fine. And I think you're raising good points. I think we've had a really good debate over it. You know, and I don't want to be the one person who's just this. There's 5 people here, so the rest of you are absolutely free to jump in and speak your minds.
On that, Amber, do you have any thoughts on this one?
I don't have anything new that I want to share.
Okay. Could you give me a direction or give us a direction as to whether you're leaning one way or another on the 2,500? That would help to know whether there's one person for something, 2 people, 3 people. It would just help in terms of facilitating this conversation.
Sure. Yeah, I will support the 2,500 and the plan to continue to look at this moving forward.
So you would be okay with 2,500 and continuing to look at this moving forward?
Yes.
Okay. So then, as I said previously, we can either do something to try to change the system and see how that works, or we can do nothing and hope for the best. I'd rather try to do something instead of just sitting back and hoping something else will change the system. I would also be in favor of raising it to 2,500 and seeing how trying to commit more efforts from the city council. I know you and I have talked privately about trying to make equity something that we have an intentional focus on. We've talked at the board level here about putting money directly towards having some kind of effort to make sure that the next iteration of the board is going to work on this more pointedly in the upcoming fiscal year. And so hopefully we can fold that into it, as well as Raj talking about the committee, commission, whatever it is, to look at governance, as we promised we would do. And so I think that was the last portion of the budget where we didn't have agreement on. So hopefully then for the next meeting, those changes that are within the memo, increasing the stipends to 2,500, getting some further clarity of that potential for space need, and then having that come back to the March 8th meeting where we have to make a final decision.
I would like to ask one other question of everyone, though. I've also said that I am really not happy with just putting this into the general fund. I would really like to see any, and we may have a major disagreement, just philosophically to me, it seems that to me, a pay raise for the city council should be pulled out and posed to the community, the taxpayers, as a separate question. I have a problem with putting it into the general fund because I think any pay increase for an elected board is always going to be controversial. And if we think the community's on our side, if we're doing this on behalf of the community, if we think this makes the community better, therefore, it seems you would want to actually ask the community's opinion. And I would urge you, in the ultimate, the next time we meet and we put the budget together, I would just urge you to really consider that. I think you could really generate some bad feelings by sticking this into the general fund. It just is a line item, and I really do. And I know you maybe you don't agree with me, but I really would urge you to do that.
So I know you talked before about how the
have a
I'm
separate
not necessarily
question.
disagreeing with you, but about having it be whether this is something we decide versus the source for it. The source, this is a new one. So you're suggesting about possibly, say, the local option tax, say some other sort. No.
I'm saying you would put a separate question on the ballot saying, shall the city council include a proposal to increase the stipend for the city council in the 2025 budget for X number of dollars?
I would really appreciate if we don't have outbursts from the audience to then interrupt the conversation. So please, I would ask that not. This is not the time for public comment.
Yeah, I don't want to start a fight, but that was my proposal. It was it was to say, obviously you can't have a proposal that retroactively amends the budget everyone's voting on. So I'm saying, why not put this as a separate question and so it would have to be worded properly so that next December, when you're putting the 2025 budget together, there you have the approval of the community for this money to raise the stipend for the next budget that you're putting together.
Okay, so
and the advantage of that is that it distances everybody. So it makes it very clear that you're not doing this just for yourselves. You're doing this for the board that's going to be in place in a year from now. And I think that would help sell it to the community a little bit better.
Yeah, I totally hear what you're saying. I was just getting hung up on at the beginning. You were talking about the funding source, but it's really the decision-making process.
It's the decision-making.
Okay.
No, obviously.
Yeah, that's all I was.
This is all coming from the general fund. So no.
Okay. Just appreciate that.
You may just want to ponder that for 2 weeks.
Plenty of time. Any other questions on that? Comments? So then going into, where are we now? The department head conversation with Jess Morris. Hey!
I'm still here. So if you'll recall, at some point last spring, summer, we started doing these department head conversations, kind of a 6-month look back, 6-month look forward. Mine is not 6 months, I did the year. Just because there is so much going on, I think that is important. You know, you guys don't see this every day. So it's important to just bring you up to speed on where we're at and what the next steps are, especially related to separation. So over the last year, kind of our primary focus in the finance department has been obviously getting through the audit, building the FY24 budget, but also focusing on how do we set up our duties day to day through the separation process. Get everyone cross-trained and trained on new duties that they'll be assigned. So part of that work has been, the physical separation of different software programs that we use, physically moving all of the finance team over here to 2 Lincoln. So we are all located in this building with the rest of the city staff, which is awesome. And being able to fill our third approved finance position early. So we have Shannon started in December, and she basically she also came from Milton.
They're gonna really hate us.
I'm shunned in my own town.
So.
No, they're fine. They're fine. But having someone who comes with a lot of experience and specifically experience with the vision that I saw for this team moving forward as a city. so it's been awesome to kind of like pull all those pieces together and have the support of not just, you know, the council and the staff and Regina, but the community as well. It's been fantastic. So we are kind of nailing down the day-to-day. We've adjusted and revamped, redone. In one case, Cindy's job description is completely new. So divided up the duties so that internal controls are being met. We've got segregation of duties, and cross-training with other departments on certain duties too. So we have backup, we've got coverage in case someone gets hit by that bus. So to this point, we have, so NEMRIC is the system on which all of the finance and clerk worlds and assessors function within the city. So as of July 1st, when we officially became the city of Essex Junction, there were some things that we had to separate out immediately. Marriage licenses, dog licenses, land records, things like that. So it's mostly clerk's office functions, but Susan and I worked very closely to, you know, she worked on kind of the day-to-day, how do we physically get this separated? And I worked on the back end in NEMRIC to figure out how do we get it separated here and get the city entities kind of up and running. So we've done that so far. Right now, I'm working on getting all of the AP processing. We use another, a standalone system for AP approvals, for invoice approvals for payment, and then that links back into NEMRIC as well. So I'm working on getting that set up and separated, hopefully in the next month. Our bank accounts have been established, and actually hopefully we'll be able to start using that with our first payroll next week will come out of that account. So Dan and I have been working very closely. We have regular check-ins where we kind of just sort of run through the separation stuff, but also we're still working as a team. The town and the city staff are very much still interconnected and working together every day. And I will admit I was nervous when Courtney left because we worked really well together. And we had really good momentum built up headed into the separation process. But Dan has been awesome to work with. So he's kind of like let me keep the charge on the separation side, and there are tasks that he's sort of taken the lead on so that I can put my focus on that project.
Great.
Yeah. So, I mean, the memo has a list of a lot of details that we're working on, but I think, like I mentioned in the budget presentation, continuing work on that capital planning and getting the committee back together and really putting our heads to developing that plan further. We're doing things like working with the state right now on separating our grand list and the tax billing. And the state is also implementing a completely new software program that's being designed and developed specifically for the state of Vermont, which will be used for grand list. It's going surprisingly well. And again, there's been really good coordination. I have contacts at the state, at PBR for all of these different pieces that we're working on. And the team that we've pulled together is state, town and city staff, NEMRIC representatives, and this Axiomatic, the new vendor that the state is using. They've all been awesome about coming together as a team and working on Essex and Essex Junction specifically. So we are actually going to be doing, in the next 3 to 4 weeks, we're going to be doing a test run of our tax billing process to make sure that we're good to go for July and August. So there's a lot of like detail work happening, but it's really big, has really big implications across the board. So ultimately, you know, when I came in here, when I interviewed, I was told you've got 3 years to figure this out. Like, no rush.
Yeah, about that.
But I can't, well, and I came in like, ain't no way I'm waiting 3 years. Like, rip the Band-Aid off. And so to come in and have the support, like I said, from Brad, who was kind of leading the charge, was my direct supervisor when I started, and then when Regina came on, from you guys, from all of you supporting, like when I said I want to hire someone before July, you guys made it happen. You approved it, and so just thanks and appreciation for being in a world that has allowed me to come in and just run with it. It's been awesome.
Thank you, and especially in the sense of when we were talking about separation, in the back of my mind, my biggest concern is from a policy stance. It's yes, this is what we need to do for our community, and once this is implemented, though, that I don't envy that role. I can only imagine how difficult this is going to be. The amount of things that you, your role, your staff are going to have to deal with. My assumption had been that the finance department was going to be the most significantly impacted, and hopefully we would be able to find the right person to fit, and we did. So thankful that you're here, that you've done what you've been able to do and get us to where we are in the time period that you have, which is beyond what I thought would have been possible.
No, Regina and I have check-ins, and I'm like, I feel like I got nothing done this week. And then I look at this list, and I'm like, oh, okay, I did.
Yeah. You've literally undone however many years of consolidation, co-locations, whatever have you, in so much less time than what it took to put it together. And yeah, no,
These two tried to make it really hard.
yeah. So yeah, nothing but significant appreciation. I also love, it's interesting to see like implementing bi-week payroll and some of those things. I also appreciate the thoughts that you've had around ways that we could improve the system of finance and ways that we could make that work better, make that be more efficient. Always appreciate that. So, yeah.
And I will say that Sarah's still very much on the line. I've got her cell phone, so.
Nice.
I emailed her this morning, actually. I was like, okay, I need you. And she's been kind of just a good, I mean, even when I was in Milton and she was in Essex, we were constantly in contact with each other, bouncing ideas off of each other. So it's awesome that like I still have that resource. And she still loves Essex and Essex Junction, so she's connected to us. But I was asking her, like, okay, this whole cash separation thing, like, help me figure this out. Because it's just it's a timing issue, right? Like, you've got to kind of freeze frame everything and figure out, okay, this is the money today that needs to come over to the city.
Yep.
But we know that finishing out the rest of the year, we're going to have tax payments coming in that we're going to have to divvy up. And so working through that process, I'm a nerd, so it's super fun for me. It's great to have other people that are just as excited about these things as I am.
Raj, Amber, George. Hi, Regina.
Just really quick, I'm just grateful to hear how wonderfully it's working with the town.
Yeah.
That's really nice to hear. So thanks to them.
Yeah. And I will say on another piece, all your communications are great. You know, sometimes that can be an issue. Sometimes you're thinking of something we're just not, but your communications via email and things we're getting here are fantastic. You're doing a really good job with that. Nice and clear.
No gobbledygook.
None. Well, it could be, but it looks like truth to me. So.
Thank you, Jess.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so now we have the discussion and consideration of a dog ordinance amendment and our rules of procedure for dog bite hearings.
Yes. So we have talked about this last on January 25th. And so you've got a memo in your packet that just describes the different pieces that we've been talking about. So what you've got in your packet is both the rules of procedure. So this is a document that Claudine worked on based on VLCT's model rules of procedure. So we can, if it's helpful, we can kind of start by going through this.
Regina, would you mind putting that on the screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Happy to.
Amber will be with us in spirit.
Okay.
And if we just toggle.
Okay. So essentially, this is just a helpful 2-page policy document. So when we get these requests, we can figure out how we want to work them through the system. So as you folks talked about already, it would be helpful if we hold these at a special meeting as opposed to a regular business meeting, because theirs can be very lengthy. Then it describes essentially how the council runs through the process, open the hearing, who gets to speak in what order, how you have folks respond to those questions. And so most of this is fairly straightforward in terms of process. It also describes at the end that the deliberations, so this is a choice. This says that the deliberations are in private. It's a choice that you can make. You can have these in public session or private session. And also it explained earlier in this as well, you can, like any other, these sort of run like more trial kinds of cases, much like the DRB runs. You can continue if you don't have enough information. You can make a decision. You can close it and make a decision that night. So hopefully this helps kind of just in terms of not the policy of what you're doing, but just the procedures of how you would run these hearings.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
And I don't, if you don't mind, and I don't, maybe this isn't the right place and I should wait until you finish everything, but it looks like to me this might be the right place. And I had asked a question before, and it's not that big a deal, but it might be helpful when we, in terms of evidence, and as I said, and Amber is here and she can probably speak more to this, but, a criminal court where someone's life is at stake, there's levels of doubt and levels of evidence. And in like a high level criminal case, you need proof beyond reasonable doubt. That's not where we're going for. You have another level of evidence, which is clear and convincing evidence. And you have a lower level, which is the preponderance of evidence. And that's like for administrative decisions. And I think that's where we are. And the reason I say it, it's very relevant to the case that we had already, which is unless someone can absolutely categorically say, yes, that dog bit me, and you have another person who saw it and said, yes, that dog bit that person. But what's generally going to happen with these things is there's going to be chaos, and there's going to be maybe one dog going after another, and someone is going to get bitten, and we have to make a decision, and we don't have an absolutely clear piece of evidence that absolutely proves that one dog bit somebody. And so it would be good. And I think in that case, as I understand it, we could use administrative evidence. We can say the preponderance of evidence, the general thrust of the thing seems that dog bit this person. And we don't actually need someone to say, yes, I actually saw the teeth enter the flesh. Right? But did she talk about that at all? Or do you think that would be helpful to have that? Maybe I'm getting a little too crazy here, but I think that really did hang us up.
Yeah, I don't think it's too crazy to ask that question of Claudine unless you have that.
Yeah, I apologize because she did answer these questions and I didn't incorporate some of them.
Okay.
I think this is probably a good one to incorporate. So in her opinion, she thinks preponderance of evidence is the one that we would
Preponderance
use.
of evidence. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay.
In this case, so we can divine that and incorporate it.
Okay. Amber, you want to weigh in on that?
I was just thinking, you must watch a lot of TV or something.
I don't know. I probably do.
No, I mean, I think it's a valid point. There is, further up in this document, it does talk about basically what the city council can take into consideration and whether what you weigh. So it does start to get into that. I can't remember exactly where it is, Regina, but the first page, and whether the city council, where was it? Can maybe further up than that. Yeah, by majority vote may exclude any irrelevant, unreliable, or unnecessary, is any verbal testimony. So it is kind of getting into that, and but I think it doesn't use those words.
Personally, it would be very helpful if it was spelled out.
I think it would be really good if we spelled it out, because even though the 5 of us are brilliant, others who follow us may not be. So, we might want to have it really written down there. Actually, I'm kidding. I actually would really helpful to have this written up for me. It would be helpful. Yep.
Great, we can add that.
Great.
Any other questions on this piece before I move over to the ordinance?
Nope.
Is there any how to ask this nicely? Is there any way to limit or decide who we hear from?
So I think it talks about that a little bit in the sense you can exclude repetitive evidence, irrelevant, unreliable, or unnecessarily repetitive evidence.
Okay, perfect. So having 6 people say the same thing over again.
Yeah.
After the third, we could say we've heard this.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great. Yep. Oh, hi, Amber.
Hey, Andrew.
What's up?
I actually had kind of a similar comment in whether we could set time limitations. And I know I've mentioned this a couple of times. I don't remember if I've mentioned it in a city council meeting or in a trustee meeting, but I know with the planning commission we did. And I was also thinking about, I was trying to remember where I'd heard this, but there's this language about, if your neighbor got up and said something, you can get up and just say ditto. You don't need to repeat exactly what your neighbor said. If you want to just, I agree with what John said, but don't get up there and say exactly what John said again. I don't know about whether there is, and I'm not sure how the rest of the council feels about setting time limitations for folks to give comments, but I don't know where the public rules come out on that issue, but I think it's tricky to have language that says by majority vote, we may exclude any irrelevant or unnecessarily repetitive evidence, because what's going to happen is you're going to be in the heat of having this evidence presented, and you're going to have to say at that moment exactly what you said, which is you're just saying the same exact thing that your neighbor just said. So you can just go sit back down. And I think there's a different way of trying to deal with that without having to individually call the person out in every hearing that we have, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, let me be really clear. What I'm trying to avoid is hearing from people that want to discuss dog psychology and weren't at the incident. If we don't think it's relevant necessarily. And I don't mean to be flip about it, but I think we run the risk of having repeat incidents where this is an emotional situation for everybody involved, not just the victim, but the people who own the dog. I mean, this is a big deal, and they're going to bring everything they can bring to save their dog. And I totally get it. We can't be doing, we have to have some kind of limitation. I think that's what I'm trying to figure out right? So I don't know I don't know how you do that.
Well, one of the other things that I'd like to see, and again, I don't know what everybody else's thoughts are on this, but there is the line there that talks about, all people offering written evidence shall submit 3 copies of the evidence to the city council. My preference for that is prior to the hearing. So this is not a situation where we're getting documentation at the hearing that we are expected to review and weigh in on. And I don't know if that directly or indirectly answer some of what your concerns might be, Raj. Because then you at least have, what the evidence is prior to the hearing in front of you.
That's a good point.
Yeah, sure.
That's a good point.
Yeah, definitely prior, right?
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be
That
good.
could work. It just do keep in mind that this is a tight time frame. We have 7 days once we get a complaint to get this scheduled, and also the police officers have to literally serve both the person, the attacker, and the owner. Not to say that we shouldn't do that, but just keep in mind the timing is tight.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I think when we say prior, I mean, a day before, I mean, it can't, what I want to try to avoid, and I generally have this opinion on city council meetings, and we have the same, during planning commission meetings, I don't like to get stuff at 5 o'clock before 6:30 meeting that I'm expected to decipher and weigh in on.
Yeah, I mean that, or this is a two-part hearing, a two-part process where the day where, the time period where we're doing all of this and receiving, and then the decision comes down at the next city council meeting, right? So then we take everything in, and maybe at some portion of the next city council meeting, because we can't do this offline, we meet either openly or an executive session, or our choice. And we make that decision and announce it there. That's another,
Yep.
that addresses the 7-day issue.
Yep.
And, right.
In terms of timing, one of the things that was mentioned about the amount of time that people can talk. Personally, it's something I struggle with setting a time limit to cut people off. That's just a personal philosophical thing. But if it is something that you all want, just tell me, and we can do that for as long as I'm in this chair. If we want to put it in the document, we can. We've had some speakers today who it takes a little longer for them to get their thought out. And so to me, to cut them off as it just takes them longer doesn't feel right and doesn't sit well with me. But at the same time, I understand that we all have things we've got to get done.
I think it's going to be, normally if people were just making a statement, but I think what's going to happen is you're going to have people making a statement, but then we're going to ask them questions. And they could, it could easily go to 20 minutes, for someone, if it's a complicated situation, you could have 5 different counselors asking someone the question. So you're going to say everything has to happen in 3 minutes. It's like, I don't think it's going to be able to do that unless you leave yourself a lot of discretion to increase the time. But I don't know how you're going to do it. I don't know. I don't have a good way.
I think the written testimony is probably we're going to still want to hear from people directly involved.
Right.
I mean, I definitely want to hear from people who are identifying as the victim, and I definitely want to hear from people who own the dog. I mean, none of these situations seem to be very cut and dry, right? So
No.
Yeah.
You could ask for everyone, and whoever is going to be involved to get a statement, and you have a basically like a witness list ahead of time, and you say, we want to hear from these people. Obviously the principal people, the dog owner and the victim,
Right.
But then we could decide, we can't just not say we're going to throw it open and anyone who wants to come up to the mic, we can say, well, we've got a list of 5 people here we want to hear from.
Yeah, and because I'm having a hard time believing that I'm going to need to hear from someone who was not there.
Right, exactly.
For a dog bite.
Right.
I'm open-minded, try to be open-minded on it, and those
Character witness.
right. But we've only done one.
That's a trickier one though, and I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to be a public meeting expert, but I don't. If you open a meeting, if you have a public meeting and you invite people to for comments, but then you don't allow them to speak, I think that's going to be tricky. I think I hear what you're saying, George. I don't think I ever anticipated that the person who is the complainant or the victim or the dog owner was going to be constricted by a 3-minute time rule.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying. I am looking more at and I did not watch the last hearing. But I gathered from the time in which it took for that process to occur, that there were many people who basically spoke for more than 3 minutes, either in support or not in support of the current situation. And that's what I'm talking about, is trying to prevent a situation where you have a 30-minute filibuster of an individual who is speaking for one way or the other that doesn't have any direct involvement. It's not the complainant and it's not the dog owner.
Right.
So you're still allowing that person the opportunity to weigh in, but you're not giving them an open forum to spend an hour or 30 minutes telling us about the psychology of the dog or whatever it happens to be.
I was just trying, is there a semantic difference between with a hearing versus a public meeting and what is allowed?
I don't know.
You referenced open meeting law. I'm not sure in this kind of hearing would actually be subject to open meeting law, that, as a matter of who we can and can't decide gets to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a public hearing. And is subject to open meeting rules, but I don't know the semantics of whether you do have to. I believe you do have to allow the public comment, but I'm not entirely positive. I think that's a Claudine question for sure.
Yeah, we can ask her that. I just keep going back to a similar process as the Development Review Board, and those you can limit participants in the Development Review Board to what's defined as an interested party by statute. I don't think these hearings have quite that level of definition in statute. So it's probably a little bit more unclear.
You do have to, with open meeting law, you do have to allow members of the public the opportunity to talk. The Vermont Supreme Court has said that, and a board can't set limits that are reasonable, so that people are given the reasonable opportunity to have their opinion heard. So you can set time limits, but if somebody is here, they do have to have the capability to have their voice heard.
I guess I thought this turned into something different with the procedures and the swearing in, that this turned into more of a because
right.
I mean, well, let's say if there's we had a DRB hearing, not a hearing, what was it? Appeal. Would anybody have been able to come, or is that DRB regulation separate? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So in that appeal, if 15 people came to talk about that, just wanted to talk about the fact that there was some aspect of this they had an opinion on, of that appeal, or is that completely separate because DRB rules limit those to interested parties?
Yeah, it's completely separate.
Okay. I don't have another example then, so forget it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But I'm only talking about broadly the open meeting law and what that means in terms of how quasi-judicial proceedings fit in with that. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I think we're probably getting off.
I don't know why you couldn't say everybody's 3 minutes or 4 minutes, but the chair has the right to extend the time. And you could just say, yeah, this person, this is the principal dog owner, this is the principal victim, this is the principal witness. You can allow that person to speak more, but otherwise everybody has to try to keep their comments within 3 minutes. So that might work, huh? Something like that.
That sounds reasonable to me. The other thing we used to do with the planning commission is that we would put it at the bottom of the agenda.
Right.
So that folks could be prepared and know that, it might make sense for them to prepare a written statement that they've timed to know that they're not going to go over that time period.
Right. And you could even say, the chair could even say ahead of time, I won't hold you because you're the only witness or whatever. You're the officer who answered the call. You're not bound by the time limit, so just take your time and give us the story.
Curious how the town deals with it.
Yeah, I've been to them. They're long. All of them I've been to are long.
I mean, in some ways, right, that's understandable because some of the, like, if it is actually a dog bite that needs medical attention, then obviously that's pretty major repercussions for that animal.
Right.
Right. So I get it. And I don't want to, just for people listening, I'm not trying to, I don't think any of us are trying to shorten this.
Yeah, no.
Just so we get out of here.
No, no.
I think that each of these hearings is going to have its own situation, its own details, and we'll give them the respect that it needs. But I think we're all worried about another 3 hour.
Yep.
Or it didn't need to be.
Okay, that's helpful. I can make some edits for that and bring back. Anything else on this document before we move over? Okay. So then what you've got in your packet is the draft ordinance. So currently in the city, our chapter 5 is the regulation of dogs. It is pretty slim. This is essentially a reworked version of what the town has for regulation of dogs on their side. And it's just more comprehensive. It brings in the, sorry, I'm trying to zoom in on this so people can actually see. Don't need to go through this whole thing, but it essentially updates the language. And for the most part, what this does is, let me scroll down here to this. It brings in this definition of a potentially vicious dog. So if you folks remember, basically what we had to work with in that case that you heard was really the state statute, and the state statute really only comes into play if a dog bites a person. This potentially vicious dog concept in the town ordinance allows you to have a hearing and put an order in place if there is a dog on dog bite based on this potentially vicious dog bite definition. Later on in this ordinance, it describes that you are limited in your order. You basically stop short of euthanasia of a dog if that's if it's just a dog biting a dog. If it's dog biting a human, that's still an option. There's just some few comments in here back and forth between Claudine and I that we can get straightened out pretty easily, just in terms of who's the animal control officer, and just clarifying that definition, that bringing in the concept of for a vicious dog, if the person is attacked, they have sought medical attention, basically. Not sure too much else that you want to go through here. It's really pretty straightforward. And it brings up the how you have a hearing in terms of the state statute, but this basically we just talked through a lot of that stuff in terms of the detail of it. And it talks about the process and how the incident is investigated. I think that was it in terms of what else I wanted to kind of point out in here. This brings in the same sorts of things in terms of running at large and brings in a little bit more definition to that. This is a this working farm dog is just a statutory exemption, so Claudine got that in there. I think that's about it. Any thoughts or questions about this? And there's also in here is your current chapter 5, just so you've got that.
Yeah, that half page.
Yeah.
Yep. I see Amber has her hand up.
So I have to admit, I was a little confused. There is definitely a certain irony to the fact that I'm confused by the legal realm here, but there in section 506, it talks about, that's the investigation section, that I know we added the potentially vicious dog, and maybe you can pull that section up, Regina, on the screen.
I'm trying to save you guys from the scrolling.
Yeah, no, that's all right.
Oh, and now I can't figure out how to get it done. Stop. There we go. Does that look right? Not yet.
Yep. So this section talks about when a person can file a complaint with the city council. And it says when a dog has either bitten or inflicted bodily injury to a person. So am I correct in assuming that they can't file a complaint when the dog has bitten or inflicted injury to an animal? Because I'm confused how these two sections are interplaying, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And this is the statute. This is the Vermont statute. I did look at this, but and this is what the town has, but I'm still just trying to grasp the concept of how it's appearing. And yet I think what we're trying to do.
So are you asking, like, if they haven't been a person, then there's no investigation?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking.
It's missing
It's missing that chunk. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, good question. And I
think
I have the same question, and I think I've found it before how it comes into play, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to find it.
It's
very quickly
507.
right now.
Isn't that address?
Oh, yeah, 507 does.
507
the one we're
addresses a potentially vicious dog, and it says a person can file a written complaint. Then it looks like it's kind of up to us. It's is that correct? Then it's discretionary. If it's a clear dog bite, but if it looks like a dog that might bite someone, it's concerning, then we shall contain the time.
Because the vicious dog is in state statute. That whole process is in state statute, and there's a portion of it that says that basically municipalities can further define other types of activities like a potentially vicious dog. So at that point, we're outside of state statute, and we have more discretion. It doesn't need to be within 7 days.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, yeah, that's why it's a little bit shorter and less defined.
So, okay, but as I understand, so if it's a potentially vicious dog, a dog that gets loose and went after another dog, but no human was bitten, and someone files a complaint, it looks to me, it says, upon receipt of a potentially vicious dog complaint, the legislative body may proceed as in the case of a vicious dog complaint. So that's how it gets in front of us.
Right. Yeah.
And then we look at the circumstances and make that decision, right?
Right. And do we want that complaint coming to us, or do we want that complaint going to the animal control officer?
Don't know.
I would say animal control officer. I think everything should be the same, except for the trigger, right? It's either potential or it's vicious.
Right.
And the other difference, the only other difference would be whether we can euthanize the dog or not.
Right.
All the investigatory stuff and the hearing and the all of that should be, I mean, otherwise because we can't just, we can't just like take that in and go, nah, we don't think it was a big deal. So everything else would sort of have to flow from in the same way that a vicious dog bite.
Right, but we'd want to know if the animal control officer made that decision. We probably want to know it. We probably want to get have some mechanism where a report is sent to us and we read and go, yeah, okay, we agree with that.
Because I really did appreciate that part of former Chief Gary,
right?
And the animal control officer here, and having all of that sort of handled, right? We knew what we were dealing with.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. So we can get this to match up more consistently.
I mean, unless it's assumed. I mean, the last sentence of A, 507A refers to the hearing. So
Yeah,
it might just be a question of like, is that good enough?
Right.
The hearing is laid out somewhere, then it's a hearing.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a little bit unclear though.
Yeah, it
Where the
is.
complaint goes. right?
It is.
Amber, did that clear that up for you?
I think so.
Okay.
Any other questions, thoughts?
My only other question is, do you think that you'd be able to get some feedback for our March 8th meeting so that we could actually warn a public hearing, so that way if we are resolved with the feedback that we get, that we can then move this forward?
Yeah, you mean on March 8th, have what you need to warn a
Right.
hearing that night?
To
Or warn?
to warn could we warn the hearing tonight for March 8th?
Gotcha.
And do you think that we'd get the responses from Claudine, so that way at the next conversation on March 8th, if we feel good with the ordinance, then we can just pass it at that point in time?
Yes,
And so-
I'm confident we can get the feedback from Claudine by then.
Great. Also asking, as I, in my own neighborhood, have recently heard of 2 other dog-on-dog bites in these past 3 weeks.
It's a thing. I like very much where all this is going, I'll put it that way. It's great. I think it's very good. It's really helpful.
So if there are no other questions, as I try and find, now I gotta follow along here.
I've got the
Yep, thank you.
motion up for you, but
I would
it
entertain the
doesn't
motion on
say
the screen.
with amendments or however you want to say.
Do we want to hear from people in the audience first?
Any questions? Comments? Yes. Zoomland? Questions, comments, concerns? Thank you, George.
Well, I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I move the city council warn a public hearing on March 8th, 2023 at 6:30 to receive comment on the following changes to the Essex Junction municipal ordinances to replace the existing Chapter 5 regulation of dogs in its entirety with the proposed Chapter 5 regulation of dogs as amended. Or just leave it.
I think just leave it. We didn't make
Dogs, period. There we go.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. That was unanimous. Thank you. And so March 8th, in theory, we would be able to pass an ordinance. And we are on to the consent.
I move we accept the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Also passed unanimously. And into the reading file and council comments. Anything broadly you want to talk about 9:54 at night?
Wow, that's leaving the witness.
You're welcome.
Not a thing.
Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed say nay. Great. Have a good night, everybody.
Recording stopped.
Good night, guys.
Have a good night, Amber.
night.
Just been real cheap.
Oh.
Before you all get away.
Uh-oh.
I really, really didn't mean any